If you're in any job that uses a computer, you've heard of ChatGPT. Now, as project managers, you've probably heard from all our colleagues in law, marketing, HR, and all these different job domains, how they're using ChatGPT to revolutionize their careers. For us project managers, the specific uses might not be as apparent. You might think it's just a fancy way of writing stuff. It's great for email marketing, it's great for bloggers, but as a project manager, what applications are there to my job? Maybe you've even spent some time experimenting it and come to the conclusion that it's not really designed for project managers. Well, in this course, my goal is to change your mind. I want to step you through everything you can use ChatGPT for to make your life easier as a project manager and to get ahead in your career. ChatGPT and AI are the future. They're changing the way we work. In this course, I want to step you through all the different ways you can use ChatGPT to manage a project and make your life easier as a project manager. In this super short, condensed course, we want to lay out the absolute fundamentals of how to use ChatGPT for project managers. In section 1, we're going to go through a brief introduction to what ChatGPT is. We'll give a bit of a history. We'll talk about generative AI. And we'll also show you how to set up and get started with it. In section 2, we're going to talk about some generic uses of ChatGPT. So nothing specific to project management, just what ChatGPT is good for. We'll teach you how to write a really strong prompt. We'll talk about how to use ChatGPT to write and create content, to summarize information, to perform data analysis, or to even learn about new topics. And in section 3, we're going to look at all of the different domains of project management, and we're going to talk about how ChatGPT can be used in each of these specific domains to make your job easier. And finally, we'll quickly recap what you've learned. We're also going to give you a 30-page downloadable list of prompts you can use right away to make your life easier as a project manager and start using this amazing tool. So far, we've helped over 20,000 students with our online self-paced project and construction management courses. We've had a ton of positive feedback. Over 94% of students we've surveyed said our courses have helped accelerate and grow your careers. I can't think of a better tool than ChatGPT to learn if that is exactly what you want to do. If you want to get ahead in your career and you want to learn and master skills, they're going to help you to do that. And this course is perfect for you. Firstly, before we get started, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for enrolling in the course. It genuinely means the world to me that there's so many people out there who enjoy these courses and take away something from them. The course is broken down into 4 sections. The sections are designed to take you through a logical sequence to master ChatGPT. In section 1, we're going to go over the complete basics. We'll show you how to set up and install it, and how to use it, and some history on it. Section 2, we'll look at generic uses of ChatGPT. In section 3, we'll talk about specific uses for project managers. And in section 4, we'll do a really quick recap. Section 1 is broken down around understanding ChatGPT, so what it actually is, what generative AI is, and we'll talk a little bit about the history of ChatGPT. Then we talk about some capabilities and limitations, so what it's good for, what it's not so good for. Then we'll give you a useful prompt set. So we'll give you a 30-page document full of different prompts you can use right away. Then we'll talk about how to set up ChatGPT and get started using it. And then we'll talk about our case study project, the Greenway expansion project that we're going to be following through the sequence of this course. And in section 2, we want to give you some generic uses of ChatGPT. So we'll basically talk about all the different things you can use ChatGPT for. Not specifically for project managers, but just generally what ChatGPT is good for. We'll talk about how to prompt ChatGPT correctly. We'll talk about how to use ChatGPT for writing and content creation. We'll talk about how ChatGPT is fantastic at summarizing information. We'll look at how ChatGPT can be used to enhance communication. We'll talk about ChatGPT can be used for data analysis and handling. We'll look at how ChatGPT can be used for brainstorming. And finally, my personal favorite use of ChatGPT, we'll speak about how it can be used for education. Then in section 3, we look at the specific applications to project management. So we've moved away from the generic general uses, and we're going to look at each domain of project management and how it can be used to do that job better. So we'll look at project integration management, project scope management, project time or schedule management, project cost management, project quality management, project resource management, project communications management, project risk management, project procurement management, and finally project stakeholder management. So basically we're covering every domain of project management as they're detailed in documents like the PIM block. Then in section 4, we're going to do a super quick recap of what we've learned. We'll also speak about some future trends of AI and what you should consider. And then finally, what the next steps you should take are to get ahead in your career using ChatGPT. Okay. If you complete 100% of the content of the course, so that means all the quizzes, all the practice activities, and all the assignments, and Udemy says you've completed 100%, you'll get a certificate of completion. I get a ton of questions about the certificate of completion, and 99 out of 100 times, it's because people haven't finished 100% of the content. That's why they can't get the certificate of completion. So if you want the certificate of completion, just make sure you finish 100% of the content. And finally, a little bit about me and why I'm teaching this topic. So my name's Tim. I'm a senior project engineer with 10 years experience in industry. I've worked across a variety of major construction and renewable energy projects. I'm a chartered professional electrical engineer and project manager, and I'm also got my PMP. Now, I've been making these courses for the last couple of years because I think there's a massive gap between what university teaches you and what jobs require of you. And I'm super fascinated by this change, this progress with technology into AI and how it's going to shape the project management industry. I've seen so much discussion of how ChatGPT is being used in marketing or how ChatGPT is being used in HR. I haven't seen a really comprehensive discussion of how it's being used in project management. Hence, I've put this content together. I've spoken to a ton of different people who are all using it, and I've been using it every single day in my job for a ton of different things. So this course, I'm going to talk about all the different ways you can use ChatGPT as a project manager. Also, before we dive into the content, I've got a couple of tips for success and how you should approach this course to get the most out of it. Ultimately, our goal for you is that you take this content and you help it to get ahead in your career. That's our ultimate goal. So these are our tips for how to use this course to best possibly achieve that. My number one recommendation to get the most out of this course is to actually finish it. A lot of people enroll in these courses and never actually watch the lectures. So if you've parted with your hard-earned money, take the course, make sure you give it the time it deserves, and then you actually put some effort into it, because that's the only way you're going to get the most out of it. The next thing you need to do is you need to apply your knowledge. You need to start using ChatGPT right away. The reason I say that is because ChatGPT is a software tool, and the only way you're going to get better for it, the only way you're going to find new applications for it, is by using it. And the final one I recommend to you is once you complete the course and get your certificate of completion, share it on LinkedIn, tell your network about it. AI is a hot topic, and by showing that you've taken the initiative to learn about it, to take a step forward, you're going to get support and recognition from your network. So I recommend sharing your success, showing people that you've mastered these new skills, and it's only going to help your career. Okay. In this first lecture, we're going to give you a complete rundown on understanding ChatGPT. In this lecture, we're going to cover what ChatGPT is, so we'll understand ChatGPT. We'll talk about generative AI, so we'll talk about what generative AI is, what the tools are, how they work, how they're meant to function. And then finally, we'll just go through a brief history of AI. So this is all about framing your understanding for the topics that we're about to cover. So we're going to start off with an important definition. So what is generative AI? So generative AI are AI models that can generate new content. So anything like text, images, music, those sorts of things. So any sort of AI tool that's generating new content is broadly classified as a generative AI. So what's ChatGPT then? So ChatGPT stands for, so the GBT is a generative pre-trained transformer architecture. So it's basically a generative AI and it's a chat function. So you interact with it like you would be chatting to a human, although there's no human on the other end of it. And it's been developed by OpenAI. So OpenAI is a company and they've developed this tool, ChatGPT. How does it work? So basically you open it up and it's a dialogue text box. Then you type in your questions, what you want it to do, you tell it things, and in response, it produces human-like text-based responses based on the information it has. So it can be thought of like interacting with a super smart human with access to an unbelievable amount of information. What can it do? So it can understand context, so you can feed it information, you can tell it what you're trying to do, you can tell it the type of project you're working on, background information, you can ask it to take on personas. You can then ask it to do things. So you can ask it to write a scope of works, write a project management plan, and then to the best of its ability, it'll generate a text-based response based on what you've asked it to do. And the input we give it, we refer to as a prompt. So we prompt it to do things and it generates text-based responses. The biggest uses of ChatGPT at the moment are things like content creation. So asking it to write a report, write an essay, write a blog post, write a social media post. So you can ask it to create text-based content. It can be used to automate customer service interactions. So if you ever go on a website and you see a chat box and it pops up and it says, "Hello, can I help you with anything?" ChatGPT can do that. It can be used for education and training. So something I actually think it's really, really useful for is if you ever see something, a term you don't understand, you're trying to understand a complex technical problem, you can just ask it to explain you things like you're 5 years old really simply, and it gives you really, really good informative responses. So it's super useful for education and training. It can be used for programming. So if you want to write code, or for example, if I need to write an Excel macro, it's really, really good for doing that. It can be used for research. So if you want to try and understand a topic, similar to the education and training, but if you're trying to do background research, you can use it for that. And then finally, you can use it for administrative tasks. So if you've got to put together a to-do list, if you have to summarize a document, some sort of boring, repetitive admin tasks that revolve around writing, it's incredibly good at. So those are the most common general uses for it at the moment. So how does ChatGPT work? Well, basically, it's a machine learning pattern recognition system, and it gets trained on a large data set. So it got fed hundreds of thousands of different documents. It analyzed all the data and used this to understand patterns. So they were picked up things like patterns in how we write, patterns in how we communicate, and then it documented all of these different patterns. So that's the training phase of how a generative AI works. It gets fed a lot of data and it recognizes patterns in this data. Based on these patterns that it's recognized, once it's been trained, it can then extrapolate out and produce responses based on the patterns it's already been exposed for. So it can produce new content based on the previous patterns it's seen. So if you ask it, like, what is an electrical transformer used for? It's previously seen data that defines what an electrical transformer is used for and how this question was answered previously. And based on this pattern that it recognizes, it can generate a new response to the question or the prompt. So that's basically how ChatGPT works. It gets trained on a large data set, it recognizes patterns in these data sets, and then it can produce new, novel content and responses based on patterns it's recognized in the data it's trained on. Now I'm just going to quickly talk about the history of AI. And I mean, this isn't really going to help with mastering ChatGPT as a project manager, but I think it's just important to understand the context of where we're up to and how long AI has actually been around and being used for. It might shock you to know that AI actually dates back to the 1950s, and we can go all the way back to Alan Turing, who came up, or who proposed the concept or the idea that machines could simulate human intelligence. Now, obviously, going back to the 1950s, when calculators were more or less a new thing, people used to use very early basic computers. The idea that if AI or a machine could replicate the intelligence of a human was absolutely insane. But the original thinking goes back to the 1950s when this concept was developed. Then in the 1960s, there was some early optimism around the topic. Initial things like ELIZA, a natural language processing computer program was developed, and the concept of neural networks begins. And so this was the early optimism phase. In the 1970s was the AI winter. So no, there weren't many advances in the 1970s with AI. There was a sort of broad understanding that human cognition was so complicated, so advanced that it would be impossible to replicate, and it led to reduced funding and research into AI. In the 1980s, there was a revival into AI. So there was more funding, there was some introduction of some expert systems that people thought might be able to mimic human intelligence. And yeah, ultimately there was a renewed interest in the 1980s when they actually started to make some progress on the topic. In the 1990s, there were more advancements in AI with the advent of the internet, computer processing speeds increasing, and there was more and more research done into this area. Then in the 2000s, with more and more people adopting the use of the internet, the concept of big data became to eventuate. So all these internet sites were collecting data, there was user behavior data, there was just all these new sources of data and the concept of big data. And then this led to progress in the concept of machine learning, where you could train something on a large set of data and use it to predict and forecast responses. Then in the 2010s is when AI really started to become mainstream. We saw it used in things like cars, in iPhone applications like Siri, and all of a sudden, whether you realize it or not, we actually started to use AI in our everyday lives. And then here we are in the 2020s with the release of ChatGPT, general AI, and starting to use AI in our everyday lives in a way that the founders and developers of it probably could not have possibly foreseen. Now the question is, what next? You don't need to be some sort of AI expert to know that the world we live in 2030 is going to be very, very, very different to what it is today, purely because of this advancing technology. So how is ChatGPT being used today? Not just in project management, but it's being used in customer service with automated responses based on different user prompts. We're seeing it used in content creation. You'd probably be shocked to know what percentage of the blog posts you're seeing on things like LinkedIn are written by AI. It's being used in education to facilitate one-on-one tutoring. I'm using it to learn a language. It's being used in healthcare for diagnosing different diseases based on the symptoms identified. It's being used in software development to write code, and it's being used in business operations to make things more efficient and easier. It really is being used everywhere as we see more and more applications for this idea that you can train something on a large data set, get it to recognize the patterns in that, then get it to produce a response, which now leads us to project management. How is it being used in project management? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in this course. Some of the specific applications that you can use to help you manage a project, achieve the project outcomes, and overall improve your job performance. But if you've got any specific ideas of ways you think it could be used, ways you think I've missed, make sure you let me know, because I'm super interested in the topic. I'm absolutely fascinated with what's going to be happening in the next couple of years and how it's going to change project management, how it's going to change construction management, how it's going to change some of the hybrid methodologies like agile project management. It is going to make a massive difference. But it's people like us, people like you who are taking the course who are going to identify some of these best uses. Okay, before we get stuck into using ChatGPT, in this section, we're going to talk about the different capabilities it has, but also some of the limitations. We want to answer the question, what can ChatGPT actually do? And then where does it require human oversight? So the first thing, basically, what it's awesome at is text generation. So if you need to generate coherent, relevant, context-dependent sections of text, then it's perfect for that. Think of writing a project management plan, writing quality management plans, something like that. The other thing it's really, really good for is language translation. So if you've written the project management plan in Spanish and want to turn it into English, it is perfect for that. You just upload the document and tell it to do the translation. and it is really, really good at language translation and text generation. The other thing it's awesome at is just supporting you with what you're going to do. And what I mean by that is if you're struggling and run into a roadblock and you need to brainstorm something, or you need to ask technical questions, or you're missing information, or your understanding of something that's generic, so not specific information that you need from a person, but just general information and understanding of concepts, it's super good at that. And it also helps you tailor things to your individual preferences. So if you're someone who likes to have complex topics explained super simply, it'll be able to do that for you. Or if you're a person who likes longer, more complicated answers, it can also do that as well. So it just gives you a tailored support when you need it, when you run into issues on a project. And then it's fantastic at programming. So for whatever reason on your project, you need to use software. So if you need to use Excel to write a macro, it's awesome at that sort of stuff. Or if you're have to do a Python script, some other sort of technical coding, then it's really, really good at if you can articulate and describe to it what you want, what you're trying to achieve. Or if you've tried yourself and you run into issues, you can copy the code in and ask it to tell you what's wrong with that. So I use it a lot for Excel formulas where you've got maybe a set of data on hours worked and you want to convert it to daily data to monthly data. You want it to write a formula for you to do that. That's the exact thing I used it for just today. It's perfect at things like that. Okay, what's it not so good at? So the first is the context. It's only able to work off the context and information it's previously been given, but on top of that, it can miss certain bits of context. So you might give it information and then it fails to record that. Maybe won't refer back to that specific bit of content, or it doesn't understand the relevance to the question you've asked. What a person you're interacting with might be able to see the bigger picture better. So it often struggles to maintain context. And then also, it's got a bias to the data it's been trained on. Obviously, it only has access to a certain set of information that it's previously been given. So it's going to recognize patterns, make decisions, and produce content based on the data it's being given. So that's the data bias. The next is the lack of awareness and availability of current information. So ChatGPT 4, if you're using it, I believe is only trained on data up to April 2023. Now, I've got to double check that, might be wrong, but I think it's April 2023. Regardless, whatever the date is, it's only got available information up to that point of time. So if you ask it, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? It's not going to be able to give you an accurate answer. Not nearly as accurate as just going to look on the weather channel, because it doesn't have access to real-time relevant information. Now that might change, but for now, it's trained on a data set up to a certain point of time, and after that, it has no understanding or no access to the information. And the next is ChatGPT can just be flat out wrong. It can give you answers that are factually incorrect, or can perform calculations are wrong. The other day, I was trying to use it as an example to calculate the weight of a section of steel reinforcement. And I looked at the actual calculation it had done, and the answer it had produced was just 100% wrong. It had made an error. Now, it's a model, it's trained on a large set of data, but it isn't 100% reliable. So where it's performing calculations, where it's giving you factual answers, you just need to be aware that it can actually be wrong. It's not 100% accurate, and nobody is claiming it is. The next one is emotional intelligence. It's a computer, it's trained on data, and it's predicting responses. At the end of the day, it doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care about other people's feelings. So to give a sensitive answer to something, it's not going to be incredibly good at that. It's just simply going to work off the data it's been given and give you the response based on the patterns it sees in this data. So it's not going to have anything like the human level of emotional intelligence. So it probably isn't fantastic at sensitive communication where you have to tailor something to the way somebody's feeling. Again, it's just trained on a set of data. So it's replicating whatever that set of data is telling us or explaining to us. So you just have to be mindful that it's not particularly emotionally intelligent, or not emotionally intelligent at all, and it's trained on a set of data. So that's limited by the accuracy of the data that it's trained on. In summary, before we get stuck into how to use it, with ChatGPT, use it for what it's good at. It's good at content creation, it's good at writing, it's good at summarizing things, it's good at basic tasks, but we need to prompt it properly. And we'll talk about how to give it proper prompts and how to feed it requests where it gives you the right answer. So you can actually improve the performance of the model in the way we ask it questions, which we're going to talk about when we talk about prompting. But you have to be careful with what it tells you, because it can be wrong. It can give you information that's not sensitive, not relevant to the context. It can forget the context. So you just have to be really, really careful when you're using it and check the answers it's giving you and make sure they fit the needs, the problem or the solution you're trying to use it to solve. Attached to this lecture is a 30-page document full of useful ChatGPT prompts. Now, the reason I put this here at the start of the course is so that you can download it now and start using it right away. The only way you're going to get the most out of this course, the only way you're ultimately going to manage and find ways that ChatGPT helps you do your job is to start using it. The prompt list is broken down really basically. In section 1, we give a bit of an overview of what makes a good prompt. And then in section 2, we go through and give you example prompts for all of the different generic uses of ChatGPT. So things like data analysis, things like writing, things like summarizing and education. So giving you prompts to use it in these generic cases. Now these prompts are just skeleton prompts. So you can make them more specific to your project by following the prompting template that we recommend. So giving it a task, a context, persona, examples, and those things. You got to improve the content of these prompts. These prompts are just examples of how you can use them. And then in section 3, we give you a list of prompts specific to different project management domains. So we'll give you prompts you can use for scope management, prompts you can use for cost management, and so on. Okay, so now we understand what ChatGPT is, how it works, what it's good for, but also what it's not good for. Let's get stuck into setting up and using ChatGPT. All right, let's first talk about how to access ChatGPT. Now, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can access it through the website. So if you simply Google ChatGPT and click on the first link, it'll take you direct to the ChatGPT website. Other way, which we're not going to cover in this course because for the purpose of using it, project management and what I want to get out of this course, it's not really relevant, but you can also access it through the API. And then the third way is when you'll be using it, but probably don't even realize it, is when you're using ChatGPT powered applications. So this is where someone else has built a ChatGPT powered application, like a customer service tool, and you're actually interacting with ChatGPT without even knowing it. Then you're also going to need to set up an account. So when you click on it, just register. You can either register for the free version or the paid version. The paid version currently, I think, is like $20 a month. In my opinion, 100% worth it, but I'll talk about the pros and cons of this for a second. Basically, you're just going to have to click through the links, enter your information, just sign up with your Google account or whatever you use, and then you'll be able to start using it. So when you've logged on, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a sign up button or a login button. If you've got an account, you can just click login. If you want to sign up, just click on the link, sign up with your Google account, sign up with your Microsoft account. And then as soon as you've registered, you're going to be able to start using it. All right. Once you've registered for an account, let's just quickly go through the basic interactions with ChatGPT, how you use it and how you interact with it. I'll go through the web interface, and then we'll also look at how you give it prompts and how you chat with it. Okay, when you open ChatGPT, you're going to be presented with this chat interaction. So you just basically ask it stuff. So tell me a fun fact about the Roman Empire, and there you go. Gives you a fun fact about the Roman Empire. Then on the left-hand side, you've got a series of chats. So each of these chats has a specific memory. It'll remember all the context you give it. And then at the bottom, you've got your settings. So we'll talk about the settings in a second. And then at the top left, you've got the different GPT options. So you can use custom GPTs, which again, we'll talk about, or the normal standard ChatGPT. So I recommend just logging in and starting to type questions and ask it and see how it interacts. So how tall is the Empire State Building? And there you go. The Empire State Building is 443.2 meters tall. So just start playing around with it, interacting with it, and see how it works. So now the question is whether to get the free version or whether to get the paid version. Now remember, things are moving really, really fast at the moment. ChatGPT, or OpenAI, I should say, is regularly releasing new updates. So pros and cons of free and paid might change as what OpenAI decides to release changes. But for now, the free version is great if you just want to try it and experiment, see what you think is actually useful, but it's got limited features. There's less things you can do in the free version. You can't use any of the custom GPTs. The overall processing time is slower because it doesn't prioritize your conversations, and the actual GPT model it uses is GPT 3.5, which isn't as good as GPT 4, which means it hasn't been trained on as big a data set. So the free version, great for experimenting and playing around, but I would recommend getting the paid version if you're serious about using it. In Australia, it's only, I think, $20 a month. So in the scheme of what you can actually use it for, I think that's absolutely nothing. But I recommend just get the free version, try it out, play with it a bit, and see if you can actually use it and you're actually getting value from it before deciding to get the paid one. There's another option in the ChatGPT settings called customization. So this is where you can feed it information about you that you want every chat in ChatGPT. When you start a new chat, it'll have access to this same context. So this is the customization section. So to access the customization section, just go to the bottom left-hand corner, click on your name, then select the customize GPT, and there's just two standard prompts. So what would you like ChatGPT to know to provide better responses, and how would you like ChatGPT to respond? Then you can also limit some things like browsing, DALL-E, what functionality do you want it to have? I personally don't use this. I'm not 100% sure how it would be useful, but if you think of a way, it's just general context you can make ChatGPT aware of for every chat. Next, let's talk about specific settings and adjustments you can give ChatGPT that you might find useful. Okay, so like going to the customization section, if you go to the bottom left-hand corner, click on your name, click on settings, and there's just a range of different settings you can look through and play with. You can change it from light to dark mode. Personally, like dark, you can archive your old chats. You can delete all your old chats. If you've got too many, you can change the voice. It gives you speech responses too. There's some data controls, and then you can create a profile for yourself if you want to build and sell custom GPTs. That might be useful. And then there's security and access settings. Okay, so we've spoken about the standard ChatGPT interface. We've spoken about the different conversations you can start, how it remembers the context of each conversation. Then we briefly looked at how you could choose between ChatGPT 4 or ChatGPT 3.5 if you have the paid version. So now let's talk about custom GPTs. So custom GPT is a GPT you or I have created and have trained it on a specific set of data. So for example, if I wanted to train a custom GPT how to write inspection and test plans for my construction project, I could go and upload 50 inspection and test plans to it, train them on that set of data, but then also train the GPT to ask you a specific set of prompts. So if you have the paid version, you've got access to a whole range of different custom GPTs that people have used and trained on their own sets of data, but also train them to give you a series of specific prompts. So if you go to the top left-hand corner and click on Explore GPTs, that'll take you to the library of custom GPTs that are available. So you can explore, look for yourself, but there's ones for coding, there's one for wine tasting there, there's one for language learning, which if we try that out, I'm learning Spanish. So it's prompting you, it's asking you a specific thing because whoever's designed this custom GPT has trained it on specific prompts it wants you to ask. And then it's asking, the first thing it asks as soon as you enter is what level of Spanish you. Then you can also look at those project management ones or specific ones better suited to your needs. Say you're applying for jobs. There's actually a great resume writing one where you upload your resume and we look for project management. Oh, yep, if we look for project, there's a project management one. We can enter a chat with it. And this will just be one that's trained on a certain set of data. So we can ask it, can you explain the agile methodology? And it's going to give us purpose-made, tailored response to this question specific for our needs. So every day there's new custom GPTs being released. My recommendation would just be to explore what's out there. And if you ever needed to do something, go look. See, maybe someone's already created one, and there'll be better available ways to do things. Throughout this course, we're going to be following along with a case study. So in this section, I want to introduce the context of the project we're going to be working on, and it's going to be the sample project or case study that we're going to be using for all the different practice activities that we do. So the project we're going to be working on is the Greenway Expansion Project. And this is the project that we're going to see how much value ChatGPT can add and whether it can actually help us to deliver the project better. So let's start with a brief project overview. So the project name, the Greenway Expansion Project, the project type, it's going to be a road construction and upgrade project. So we're going to be upgrading an existing road. The objective is to reduce traffic congestion and to enhance road safety in the area. The scope is to construct a 5-kilometer additional traffic lane next to an existing roadway, cover the installation of modern street lighting for improved nighttime visibility. We're also going to install roadside barriers for traffic user safety, and it's located in the Greenway corridor in the Springfield region. So project justification and community impact. So needs analysis. So current traffic data shows bottleneck issues causing delays and accidents. The impact we're going to have on the community is we're going to reduce traffic volume. We expected traffic modeling shows we're expected to decrease traffic congestion by 30% and enhance commute efficiency. Night safety, so new street lighting will increase nighttime visibility and reduce accident rates by an estimated 25%. So environmental considerations, so we're going to incorporate LED street lighting to minimize energy consumption and environmental impact. And the economic benefit, the project is projected to boost local businesses by improving transport efficiency and accessibility. So basically, more local businesses are going to be able to be accessed because of this new road upgrade. It's going to make it easier for people to get to them. What about the money side of things? So the total project cost is estimated to be $20 million. So the funding sources, the local government's going to spend $12 million and federal transport has given an $8 million grant. So the project has been funded. The budget is allocated to $10 million for the road construction and materials, $5 million to install the new street lighting system, $3 million for the roadside barriers, and $2 million kept as a contingency, and so financial projections. So because of the anticipated improvement in local economic activities, which would potentially lead to increased tax revenues, we could potentially, based on these financial projections, offset the initial project costs within the first 5 years. So now let's talk about project time. So the project duration is expected to take 18 months from initiation to completion. Some key milestones: the project's planned to kick off in January 2024. The completion of the road laying should be in the first 6 months, which is July 2024. Street lighting should be installed by December 2024. And the finalization of all the safety checks and to get the road ready for opening should be June 2025. So how's the schedule going to be managed? We're going to utilize Gantt charts and weekly progress meetings to ensure we adhere to this timeline. We're also going to perform regular risk assessments to identify potential delays and implement timely mitigations. So stakeholders and community engagement, who are we going to impact by the project and who's interested in it? So the key stakeholders are local government, federal transportation authorities, local residents and businesses. The communication strategy, we're going to set out a monthly newsletter to update stakeholders on progress. There's going to be public forums every quarter to discuss developments and address community concerns. What are the community benefits going to be? Well, obviously there's going to be enhanced road safety and reduced traffic, leading to quicker emergency response times and increased property values due to the improved infrastructure. So those are going to be the benefits we're going to try and sell the community on. The feedback mechanisms is we're going to have a dedicated project hotline for queries and concerns, and we're going to have an online portal for providing updates and gathering feedback. So that's the general stakeholder and community engagement. Okay. So the first thing we have to do with this project information is give it to ChatGPT. This is going to be the context. So we're going to open a new chat, and this is going to be the chat we use to create our project documentation. And we're going to feed this information into ChatGPT so it understands the background, the project, and what information is available. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to say, I'm working on a project and need your help to manage it. I'm going to copy in information to provide context. Do you understand? So I'm not actually asking ChatGPT to do anything yet. I purely just want to feed it information so it remembers it and it takes this as the context for the rest of the project. And basically I'm just going to go through and all that information in the slides, I'm going to copy and paste into the chat. So very basic. And ChatGPT is going to be able to remember this and it's going to refer to this later on. Welcome to section 2. In section 2, we're going to be looking at generic uses of ChatGPT. So we're not worrying too much about the application of project management yet. We're just going to give you an overview of all the different ways you can use ChatGPT. And we're going to start with talking about how to write the perfect prompt. Why does that matter? Because the better we prompt ChatGPT, the better the answer we're going to get. So prompting is a really, really important skill to master. Then we're going to talk about all the different generic applications of ChatGPT. Things like writing, communication, summarizing documentation, or education. The first use of ChatGPT we're going to talk about, and the first skill you need to master when you're using ChatGPT, is prompting. So this is the way we're going to feed it information and ask it to do things for us. What is prompting? So prompting is how we interact with ChatGPT. It's the information we feed into it to get the desired responses. Why does prompting matter? Because effective prompts lead to better answers. If we give ChatGPT garbage, it's going to give us garbage in return. So we need to understand how to prompt it effectively to get the desired responses that we need. Just so we're clear on the terminology, if I look at this screenshot from ChatGPT, the prompt is what I've asked ChatGPT. So I've asked it, what is construction project management? The response is what ChatGPT tells us. So the response is construction project management involves overseeing and planning, designing, construction of a project, typically in a building industry, blah, 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 blah. So the prompt was what is construction project management, and the response is what it's told us. Prompt engineering is the skill of prompting ChatGPT effectively to give it the responses we want. So a prompt engineer is actually a proper job now. It's such a skill, and people understand that it's something you can do badly or you can do well, and it can ultimately lead to better or worse results. So you need to actually understand how to interact with ChatGPT to get the best possible responses. Let's start with what a bad prompt would be. So this is an example of a bad prompt. How should I deliver a project? Well, it's going to give you a generic answer because you haven't given it any context, you haven't asked it to do anything specifically. It's just going to give you the most generic answer to that question. Delivering a project successfully involves a blend of careful planning, effective communication, and rigorous execution. Here's a structured approach to help you manage and deliver a project efficiently. It's just giving you standard stuff, and it's almost certainly not what you went on to ChatGPT to do. What's an example of a good prompt? So a good prompt has more context, it's more specific, and it gives ChatGPT the information it needs to be able to help you. So a good prompt. I'm the project manager of a $5 million road construction project in the east of Melbourne, Australia. The project will take place in winter. I've never delivered a project this big. I'm working for the general contractor engaged by the project developer. The project has just started the design phase, and we have not started on-site works. Act as a mentor or experienced project manager, and I want 10 short, simple, actionable dot points that I can use to perform well. You're telling it exactly what you want. You want 10 short dot points, you want it to act as a mentor, and then you're giving it the context it needs to answer the question effectively. Let's break this down and look at what makes a good prompt. Now, all of these aren't necessary in every prompt, but they're ranked from the most important to the least important. So these things are a task, context, example, persona, format, and tone. Now, we always need to give ChatGPT a task. So that's why task is ranked at the top. And you could still give ChatGPT a task and it'll give you an answer. So previously, when we had the bad prompt, we asked, how do I deliver a project? It was given a task and it gave you an answer, but it had no context, didn't have an example of the format you wanted, didn't have a persona to go off, so the overall answer wasn't very useful. But the task is always essential. Now we're going to go through each of these in a little bit more detail and explain what we mean and what is an example of a well-formatted prompt. A task is where we tell ChatGPT what we want it to do. So when we're giving it a task, we should always start with an action verb. So we're going to tell it something like generate a list, summarize this document, review this plan, analyze this set of data. So we're giving it an action verb, an instruction of what it has to do. We can either give him across multiple messages, or we could multiple tasks in a single prompt, or we could just have a single one. So prepare a list of activities involved in the construction of an in-ground concrete pier for a light pole foundation. So the action verb is prepare. Identify a list of possible risks for this task. The action verb is identify. Next, we need to give it context. So you can imagine you're interacting with another person and you're asking them to perform this task. What background information do they need to know to do it effectively? ChatGPT can't work miracles. It doesn't have access to the context or the information. It's not going to be able to help you. So you need to find the right balance of what information to provide. Well, and a way to ask this is what information would be relevant to an uninformed individual trying to complete this task? We also need to define what does task success look like. So that's when we give it the context. So as an example, I'm conducting a risk management workshop at the beginning of a project. This project is the migration of a hospital software system from an old system to a new system. The files are critically important. At the meeting will be a variety of different stakeholders who are not familiar with technical terminology or jargon, and I want to be as simple as possible, and I am concerned with making them comfortable that all the risks are properly addressed. So we told it what success looks like. We said we want to make our stakeholders happy that all the risks are being assessed, and we've given ChatGPT the context around which they're going to have to perform the task. Now, once we've given it task and context, another thing we can do to drastically improve the performance of the answer is to give it an example of what we want. So we could say, here is a good example of one of the risks. During system migration, data is lost and patient records cannot be recovered. So we're giving it an example of the format, the type, the style of the risk we want, and this is going to help it drastically improve performance. There's actually been a lot of research done on large language models like ChatGPT that show giving an example of what you want will help it drastically improve the performance of the task. Another example, we could say, please ensure the risks are project specific. For example, do not talk about how COVID can impact the project because that is a generic risk that everybody is aware of. So we're telling it that we don't want generic risks, and we're giving them an example of what we define a generic risk to be. The next thing we can do to help increase performance is give ChatGPT a persona. So we can actually give them a persona of a person that we would ideally want us to help with the task. So if you actually had this task in real life, and in your mind, you could choose the perfect person to help you, then who would be somebody you would ask to help with the task? So for example, when preparing the risk register, act as a company chief risk officer. Provide advice as an experienced project manager who has dealt with these sorts of problems. Now that's the perfect person you would want to help. If you give ChatGPT this framework, it's also going to increase the performance of the prompt. Then we want to give it format. So what exactly do we want the end result to be like? Do we want an essay? Do we want dot points? Do we want a table? Tell it exactly what format you want the result to be in. So prepare a project schedule for the construction of a new road. For the format, I want the result to be in a table with task number, activity name, activity start date, activity end date, and activity precursor. You can see in the answer to this prompt, it's given us exactly what we've asked for. It's given us a table with these headers. Now that could be super useful because we could copy that information into Microsoft Project, for example, because it's given us in that exact format. And finally, we can give it a tone. So what is the tone we want it to respond in? Could use a casual tone, we could use a formal tone. Again, it depends on the document we're producing. If we're producing a project management plan that the client has to approve, we don't want to use a casual tone. We want to use a formal tone. But if we're producing, we need to write an email to a colleague explaining them a concept, we might want to use a casual tone. So we can actually specify the tone we want ChatGPT to respond in. So let's put this together into an example of what a good prompt looks like. So as an example, you are a senior project planner tasked with preparing a detailed construction schedule for a new road project. The project involves constructing 2 5-kilometer road lanes, including guardrails, street lighting, and line marking. The project is planned to start on the 1st of August 2024. Prepare a construction project schedule that is output as a table with activity number, activity name, start date, end date, and activity precursor. The schedule should involve around 30 activities. The level of detail I'd like to includes mobilizing to site, excavating in 1-kilometer sections with lag between activities, concrete foundations for lighting, etc. So breaking this down, where's the task? Task is to prepare, so action verb, prepare a construction project schedule that is outputted as a table. That's the task we've given ChatGPT. Next, we've got the context. So the project involves constructing 2 5-kilometer road lanes, blah, 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 blah. This is the context and background information it needs to complete the task. Then we've given it an example. So we've said the schedule should have involved around 30 activities. The level of detail I would like includes mobilizing to site, excavation 1 kilometer sections. We want lags between activities and that sort of detail. So we've given it examples of what level of detail we want and what example tasks would look like. And then we've given it a persona. So we've told ChatGPT, you are a senior project planner. Why have we chosen that? Because if we're doing this in the real world, that's what we'd want. We'd want a senior project planner. And we've given it a format to output. So output as a table with activity number, activity name, start date, end date, and activity precursor. We've told it the exact format that we want the output in. So what's ChatGPT done? It's given us the exact format, the exact answer we've asked for. It's given us a table with 30 lines. It's got activities broken up into sections. There's 1 kilometer sections of earthworks. These activities are linked. And basically it's done exactly what we've told it for us because we've prompted it effectively. Okay, so now we know how to prompt ChatGPT. Now, let's move on to talking about how to use ChatGPT to write, how to use it to create content, and what process we can follow to get the most out of this. In this section, I'm going to give you a set of steps you can follow to get the most out of the content creation process with ChatGPT. So how does it start? It starts with using ChatGPT to generate an idea for what you want to write. So you might already know this, or you might need to brainstorm this with ChatGPT. The next thing is you want to create an outline. So you want to structure what you're trying to say. You want to set up a list of dot points and outline, and then use ChatGPT to refine this. The next, you're going to tell ChatGPT to write it. And finally, you're going to edit, review it, get it to change the tone, and work with ChatGPT to perfect it. The first step is the idea. So working out what you want ChatGPT to write. Okay, so I'm going to get really meta. And for this example, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to produce a piece of content that explains to people best way to use ChatGPT to write. So I want to start off with refining the idea. I'm going to explain to ChatGPT the context. I'm going to tell it what I'm trying to do. Then I'm going to try and work with it to refine this. I'm going to try and work out with ChatGPT what's the best format we can use to write this. So I'm going to say, I'm an e-learning instructor producing a course on ChatGPT for project management. I would like to create a short document that explains the use of ChatGPT for content creation. What would be the most useful type of document to provide my students? So I'm asking ChatGPT, what is the best type of document I can produce that's going to explain the content creation? And what's ChatGPT said to me? It's given me the option of a guided tutorial, a use case compilation, a best practice guide, or a workshop handbook. So it's given a range of different things we could produce. So once we worked out the specific format of the document we want to write, what type of document we're producing, the next step is to develop an outline. So we actually want to outline what we want to say. Okay, so we've decided on producing a guided tutorial. So we're going to tell ChatGPT that we want ChatGPT to produce a guided tutorial, and we want it to structure an outline for us. Then we're also giving ChatGPT the structure we want it to follow. So we're telling it the broad overview of the structures similar to these lecture slides. So we want it to determine an idea, we want to set an outline, then we then want it to write the content, and then we want it to then help us edit. And we've told it we want it to produce a dot point outline. So ChatGPT has produced the outline, a guided tutorial on using ChatGPT for content creation and project management. It's given us an introduction, section 1, determining an idea, section 2, setting an outline, and section 3, writing the content, and then section 4, editing and refine. So whenever it gives you an outline like this, the first thing you want to do is you just want to read through it, and you want to think, is the topic comprehensive? Does the logic flow? That's the biggest thing for me, is often ChatGPT will give you an answer to a question, but then if you were the person trying to read and understand it, the logic just won't make a lot of sense. So that's why I want to go back, want to review it, and you always want to see, does the logic make sense, and is it trying to explain what you want it to? And then if it's not, you can give it feedback. So you can say, rewrite the outline a different way, or in this case, we're saying the outline's good. However, we want it to be more specific. Then based on this, ChatGPT is going to recreate the outline. It's going to give us additional feedback. It's going to structure it in a different way, better suited to what we want. And here we get the updated outline. So it's given us more detail. You can see it's expanded on section 1, spoken about project needs assessment, brainstorming, and choosing an area of focus. And yeah, it's expanded on what we want. And this is the process through which we refine the outline. So once we create our outline, the next thing, we want it to actually write the content. So we want to instruct it to write a piece of content in line with the outline. So now we've developed our outline. We're just going to say, now write the document. We also want to specify how we want it to write it. So in this case, we want it to be very simple and concise. We want someone taking the course to be able to quickly grasp the core concepts. They don't want to spend a lot of time reading it. It's not a piece of fiction. It's not meant to be fun and engaging. It's meant to be concise and transfer knowledge. So we're going to tell ChatGPT that we want it to be simple and concise. It should have clear headings so it's easy to understand the flow. And then we also want the document to include useful examples of prompts. So basically the user can take it and it gives them exactly what they want. Let's see what ChatGPT produces. It's given an introduction. Step 1, it's given it a simple dot points like we've asked. It's given us an example prompt. So it said, then it's given section 2 and another example prompt in section 2. Maybe we read this and we think, well, actually we want 10 example prompts for each section, but go through and edit and refine this once the document's being written. When we edit the document, we're going to get ChatGPT to alter the tone and style and basically refine what's been written. So when you're editing something that ChatGPT has written, just read through it, understand the flow, make sure the content's all there, make sure it says what you want it to say. But the key thing I would always look at is ChatGPT is always overly wordy. It gives you answers that are more complicated than you want. That's why I like to use the term simple and concise whenever you're asking it to write something. So we look at section 1, section 2, setting an outline. So the purpose, define the structure of your document to ensure all relevant topics are covered. Covering creating a basic outline. The example prompt covers section 3, so utilizing ChatGPT to fill in sections of the document. Then 4, step 4, editing and refining. It's covering polishing the document to ensure clarity and accuracy. The initial edits for grammar and style, an example prompt, and then the final review and adjustments. And basically, we just want to be happy with what it's saying to make sure it's covering exactly what we want it to cover. And then if we want it to, we can ask it to rewrite it in a different tone. So we've read it, say we're happy that the content's all there, but it's not going into enough detail. We can ask it to rewrite and expand on each section. So if you look at it now, the introduction's bigger, section 1's going to be bigger, covering more content. And again, ChatGPT just takes a bit of time to compile these answers because it's so computationally heavy. And again, as we've asked, it's just going through and expanding on each topic. And then we could rewrite it again, and we could even ask it to rewrite it in a separate tone. However, I've reached my limit with how many times I've asked ChatGPT to do something. Got to leave it for a bit. But as you can see, this is the type of process you can go through with ChatGPT to write something, to edit it, and to get it to say exactly what you want it to say. In this section, we're going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT to summarize and simplify information. So in the form of text documents, data sets, we'll look at how you can use ChatGPT to summarize it and make it easy to access the information you need to know. You can use ChatGPT to produce highly efficient and straightforward summaries of big chunks of information. And this is a really easy way to save a ton of time when you're going through documents and when you're trying to review a lot of different bits of information. There's a simple 4-step process you can follow to generate a summary with ChatGPT. Number 1 is to upload the document. So you input the information into ChatGPT, whether it's a PDF file, a Word doc, or another form of document. The next is you want to tell ChatGPT what your objectives are when reviewing the documentation. So what exactly do you want ChatGPT to focus on? What form of summary do you want? The next thing is you're going to generate the summary. You're going to tell ChatGPT to generate the summary in line with the objectives you've set. And then finally, you can review it, you can ask ChatGPT questions, and you can basically get it to find the information you want in the document. Okay, so there's lots of different types of documents you can upload to ChatGPT if you have the paid version. So the paid version has the advanced analysis tool. So you can upload text files, you can upload data files, you can upload images, audio files, video files, and even document files. that's only available for the paid version. If you're using the free version, the way it's currently set up is you'd have to copy and paste the text or the information from the document. So if you have a Word document and you want it to summarize the content of that Word document, you have to directly copy the content of the Word doc into ChatGPT. This example, we've got a PDF file, which is from a tender for a construction project. So there's a new project that the Alice Springs Town Council is asking for quotes for, and they have a 50-page document with tons and tons of different information, what they want the tenderer to quote for, what documentation they want you to provide when you submit your tender. So we're just going to upload that to ChatGPT, and we're going to ask it to summarize this information. So all you do is drag and drop the PDF into the chat section. The next thing we need to do is we need to set objectives. So we have to tell ChatGPT what we're looking for in the document. So what do we mean by this? We could ask it, what are the key statistics? We could ask it to summarize the main points into short dot points. We could ask out, if it's a process, we could ask it to list out the key steps in the process. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is we want to tell ChatGPT what information we're looking for, what we want it to summarize. We're going to do this by prompting ChatGPT. So when we upload the document, we're going to combine this with a prompt that tells ChatGPT exactly what we want it to do with the document. In this situation, we're going to tell ChatGPT we're working for a general contractor who's interested in tendering for the works. We're going to ask it to summarize the key information about the tender. We're asking ChatGPT to act as a tender coordinator for a large construction company. They're going to review the document and they're going to pass on the key bits of information that we would want to know about the job. For example, when the tender's meant to start, who the key personnel are, what documents they require, and a high-level summary of the project scope. And then once we've uploaded the document and given a prompt to explain what we want with it, all we have to do now is produce the summary. Okay, so let's look at what ChatGPT has given us. So remember, this is a 53-page document that would have taken a fair bit of time to go through, but it's given us the project overview, the tender documents, the key dates, the tender submission, the contact information, the inspection and site visit, the evaluation criteria, the scope of works, and more. It's given us all the key bits of information so we don't have to spend ages going through the document to find it all for ourselves, saving us a ton of time. Once we've been given a summary, the next thing we want to do is review the summary. We can actually ask ChatGPT questions about the data, we can edit the summary if we need to, and we can tailor it if we need to send this summary out to other people. Once we've been provided the summary, we can then quickly review it, and then we can also look and ask ChatGPT if there's more information we're looking for. Rather than having to go into the document and look for it ourselves, we can simply ask ChatGPT. So for example, if we wanted more information about the specific scope of works, we can just ask. We don't have to go looking through the document. In this way, the document actually becomes more interactive. So instead of having to open it, Control F and look for things, we can simply ask questions. ChatGPT can tell us if the information's available or if it's not. And in this situation, it's provided a much more comprehensive summary of the scope of works. As a project manager, what are some key uses of summarizing information? Well, as you all know, projects contain a ton of different information, documents that we constantly have to go for, looking for specific things. So summarizing information is going to save you a ton of time as a project manager. What can we use it for? Going through project documentation, going through standards and specifications, summarizing meeting minutes. So for example, you could upload the audio recording of a meeting and get it to summarize and write the meeting minutes to save yourself the time. You can use it for learning and development, so onboarding people onto the project, summarizing the key project documents and turning this into a presentation. And you can also use it for stakeholder engagement, informing stakeholders, summarizing key bits of information and passing it on to them. Really, there's going to be a ton of applications for summarizing key bits of information. Projects involve communicating and collaborating with a massive amount of people. There's the project team, the ones doing the work, there's stakeholders, there's the client, there's lots and lots of people impacted by any single project. And so systematizing and making it easy to communicate is going to make your job as a project manager much easier. ChatGPT can be used for a broad range of different forms of communication. And we're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used to write and draft emails, prepare reports, summarize information like we've already spoken about, create newsletters or social media posts if you want to communicate to a broad audience, create presentations, translate documents into other languages, and then finally make information accessible to different groups of people. In the same way we can use ChatGPT to write any sort of document, we can use ChatGPT to write emails. Emails are such a big part of our lives these days. If we want ChatGPT to write effective emails, we just need to provide it clear details and tone. So we need to tell it exactly what we want it to say, but also the tone we want it to say it in. We want to review the email and personalize it as required, but also keep it concise. Now, ChatGPT has a tendency to be overly wordy and explain things in complicated ways. So make sure you always prompt it to be concise with how it writes. So in this example, we've asked ChatGPT to write an email to the company team explaining the upcoming tender and the key information. We've told it to use a casual tone and explain we are desperate to win the project. So ChatGPT has prepared us an email telling us, send out a message to the team, explaining the tender, telling them the key bits of information like the tender closing date, the project scope, and also the key contact person for the client. And then they've also finished off with a conclusion explaining how we're desperate to win this project. ChatGPT can also be used to prepare reports. So reports are formal, structured ways of communicating set project information. When we're getting ChatGPT to write a report, we want it to define the scope of the report, so what we want it to say, but also the structure we want it to say it in. We can also get ChatGPT to prompt us to request missing information. In this example, for our Greenway expansion project, we're asking ChatGPT to write a quick, concise summary of the project as a report for management to explain them the project details. We haven't given it any other structure, but it's broken it down with the project overview, the structure, it talks about the budget, the timeline, and key milestones. And it also summarizes with management action points. So what do management need to do? They need to review and approve the budget allocations and these sorts of things. Then we can ask ChatGPT what additional information should be included in the report. Now, as we've already spoken about, summarizing information is also a critically useful part of communication. People don't want to look at 100-page documents or reports, so being able to use ChatGPT to extract the key information relevant to a specific person is going to be incredibly useful. In this example, again, for the Greenway expansion project, we've asked ChatGPT to prepare a short dot point list of information for the project scheduler, and it's extracted what would be relevant to the person that has to develop the schedule. So it's talking about the scope, risk management, the reporting requirements, and everything relevant to their job. If, for example, we want to produce a report or an update for a large group of stakeholders or different people on key project items, we could get ChatGPT to write a report or social media post. And to do this, we'll just simply follow the content creation process we discussed in one of the previous sections. Another awesome way we can use ChatGPT to communicate information is through presentations. Now, if we're using Microsoft PowerPoint, there's some amazing functionality where we can use ChatGPT to directly produce outputs that we can just copy into Microsoft PowerPoint. And this is a super handy way if you ever need to make a presentation. So we can simply ask ChatGPT to produce a presentation on the project, and it'll give us 10 slides, each with key bits of information. Now, we can take this presentation and directly put it into Microsoft PowerPoint by asking for the VBA code. When it gives us the VBA code, we simply just copy this, open up PowerPoint, go to the Developer tab, and insert a new module and paste this code in. When we run that, it'll extract the information from ChatGPT and put it into a brand new PowerPoint for us. Then, and this is an awesome trick, if we use Microsoft PowerPoint Designer, we can get Microsoft PowerPoint to turn this pretty bland basic presentation into something that's visually appealing. And in under 60 seconds, you can have an awesome presentation on whatever topic you want. Another cool way we can use ChatGPT to enhance communication is by translating things from one language to another. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT to translate this presentation into Spanish, and all of a sudden we have another presentation that we can easily give out to people who didn't speak English and want the presentation in another language. And then finally, we can use ChatGPT to make information more accessible. What I mean by this is we can take complicated topics that not everyone would be able to understand, and we can ask ChatGPT to simplify them and make them accessible to a broader audience. We could ask ChatGPT to do a non-technical summary, and we could ask it to simplify information so a child could understand. For example, I've asked ChatGPT, how do electrical transformers work? I've given it no other prompting, so it's given us quite a complicated answer that goes into detail about energy transfer and all these complicated topics. But we could also ask ChatGPT to explain this to a 10-year-old. And it's giving us a really simple example where it's saying, think of transformers as a magical device that can change the strength of electricity. This is going to make the information way more accessible to different demographics. Projects typically involve significant amounts of different forms of data. And that's why in this section, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used for data analysis. We'll give you some guidance and structure on how you can use ChatGPT to process different sets of data and what functionality it's particularly useful for. The first thing ChatGPT is particularly good for with data analysis is simply providing guidance and helping you understand concepts. Even if you're not using ChatGPT for the specific data analysis, you can use it to simplify and help you understand data analysis concepts, so you can then do the analysis in other softwares like Excel. So for example, if you don't know what a regression analysis is, ChatGPT can explain this to you in simple terms and give you examples. It can also provide you coaching and guidance for how to do specific analysis on your project. For example, in this situation, I've told ChatGPT that we're running into cost increases on the project due to quality and weather issues, and I've asked it for guidance on how I could best visualize this and create a chart that explains this to management, and it's given me a whole range of different options. The next really awesome use of ChatGPT for data analysis is to help you use other softwares. For example, if you need to use Microsoft Excel or Python or some other more specific form of data analysis software, ChatGPT can give you the formulas and the codes for what you need. For example, I've told ChatGPT that I have a set of data that is week by week expenditure and I want to convert it to month by month. ChatGPT's given me two separate options of whether I can use a pivot table or it's actually written me a formula that I can just copy into Excel that will do this conversion for me. The next use ChatGPT has for data analysis is to get it to do the actual data interpretation. So we can upload data sets like CSV files or Excel documents to ChatGPT and get ChatGPT to do the data analysis for us. So for this example, I've got a set of earned value management data, which is week by week data of actual cost, planned value, and earned value. I'm going to upload this to ChatGPT and I'm asking it to calculate the cost performance index and schedule performance index. So it's taken in the data and against each week by week data, it's calculated the cost performance index and schedule performance index for us and also given us an interpretation. So when the CPI is less than 1, it's a bad thing. Then it's actually plotted this on a chart for us so we can visually see week by week what's happening with our cost performance index and schedule performance index. All we had to do is get the Excel data, upload it to ChatGPT, and give it a prompt. We can also use ChatGPT to help with data collection. So say we need to engage stakeholders and get their feedback on the project, we could get ChatGPT to draft and create us a survey for what information we should be requesting from them. And then when the data comes back, simply upload the data to ChatGPT to process. In this example, I've told ChatGPT I'm working as a project risk manager and I need to collect data from stakeholders to assess project risk, and I've asked them to prioritize the top 5 project risks, and ChatGPT simply produced a survey that requests this information from them. The final thing I want to show you with data analysis are custom GPTs. So there are some great custom GPTs specifically designed and trained for data analysis. So the one I'm going to show you in this example, you upload a data set to it. ChatGPT takes you through exploring and understanding the data, then cleans the data. It performs some exploratory data analysis, and then finally helps you with any predictive modeling you want to use the data for. In this example, I've got a set of month-by-month rainfall data, which I want to use to help understand the risk of inclement weather on our project. So all I've done is I've taken the CSV file, uploaded it to ChatGPT. ChatGPT's told us the average month-by-month rainfall data, and then it's plotted it for us. So ChatGPT can do all the hard work without data analysis, and it's an incredibly useful tool for making data analysis as easy as possible, even if you don't know anything about data analysis. In this section, we're going to talk about how you can use ChatGPT for brainstorming. Basically, how you can use it to generate a ton of ideas. What is brainstorming? Well, brainstorming is just generating ideas. You can use ChatGPT to generate a superset of ideas to problems. You can use it to identify risks. You can use it to identify activities. Basically anything where you're sitting down and trying to come up with activities, lists, tasks, risks. Going through that process of brainstorming, ChatGPT is a super useful tool that you can use. In this example, we've asked ChatGPT to generate a superset of risks. So if you could imagine, we're going through the risk management process and we need to identify all the risks. We've asked it to group these risks under different headings. For example, there's safety and security risk, there's financial risk, there's schedule risk. ChatGPT has gone through and helped us identify a possible list. While generating ideas, lists, risks, these sorts of things are super useful for project management, the other way we can use ChatGPT with brainstorming is when we give it a specific problem to solve. For example, say something's gone wrong in our project. We're spending too much money, we're getting behind the schedule. We can tell ChatGPT what our problem is and ask it to help us solve it. Now, how well it solves it is going to be dependent on the amount of context we give it. So we need to make sure we're feeding it as much context and information as possible. And in doing so, ChatGPT can help us with root cause analysis and developing different strategies for solutions. It's going to help us to brainstorm all of the possible solutions to a specific problem, which is different to brainstorming to generate a superset of ideas. In this example, we've told ChatGPT we've run into a problem on the project. We need an excavation permit to start works, but the permit wasn't ready on time. What we've asked ChatGPT to do is to facilitate a root cause analysis. So I've asked ChatGPT to go through the process of working out what the root cause of the problem is, and it's come up with different ways to do this. We could do a 5 whys strategy. It's given us some different diagrams, and overall it's going to facilitate that process for us and come up with suggested solutions. So that's how we can use ChatGPT to brainstorm. The last general use we're going to look at for ChatGPT is education. Now, as a construction project manager and someone who's worked on a lot of technically driven projects, I can tell you that education and understanding concepts is the single biggest use I have for ChatGPT. So I use ChatGPT every single day to look up different concepts and explain them. For example, say you're going through a set of engineering drawings and you see an item on the drawing that you're not familiar with. All you do is ask ChatGPT, explain this to me very simply. And it'll give you a technical answer in a way that you can understand. So ChatGPT is almost like a better form of Google for researching topics. So in this section, I'm going to talk about how you can use education to facilitate project management. So when talking about ChatGPT for education, I've broken it down into 3 separate sections. So you've got education on project management concepts. So this is understanding things like what agile is, what the critical path is. You can use it to understand project management concepts. You can use it to understand technical content. So if you're at the example I gave before about finding something in engineering drawings that you don't understand, or maybe you're working on a healthcare project and don't understand a specific medical term. So you can use ChatGPT for understanding technical concepts. And the final use case for education is where you need to learn project-specific information. So this is basically doing research on the project documents and the project context to understand project-specific information. The first use case is mastering specific project management concepts. So this is trying to understand things like what agile is, what scheduling is, what estimating is. ChatGPT can easily and simply explain these concepts to you. So I've broken these concepts down into two separate buckets. So there's the things you don't know. For example, you see the term critical path and you want to understand what the critical path is. That's super easy. You just ask ChatGPT to explain it to you. The other group of concepts are things you don't know. For example, if this is your first time working on a project and you're spending too much money and you can't work out why, that's a specific project management concept you're not following. You don't understand how to control costs. You don't understand the purpose of cost tracking. You don't understand the purpose of budgets. You know you have a problem, but you don't know exactly what you don't know. So in that case, you should ask ChatGPT things like, what can I do to improve specific performance in an area? What can I do to improve schedule performance? What can I do to improve budget performance? And in that way, ChatGPT is going to educate you on different processes. So for the first example, we've just asked ChatGPT, what is the critical path? So it's telling us the critical path is the longest sequence of dependent activities. It's giving an example of what it is, how to identify the critical path, and then for our project, what it understands the critical path to be. Now, the second set of examples. So we're struggling to keep the project on schedule. We've got a problem, but we don't know exactly what we don't know about solving it. So we're explaining to ChatGPT our problem, and then it's giving us some suggestions on how to solve us, improving communication efficiency, optimizing resource allocation, enhancing risk management. So this is a different way of asking ChatGPT to educate us on project management concepts. Now we understand how to educate ourselves on project management concepts. The second set of concepts that ChatGPT is incredibly good at helping us understand are technical concepts. So say, for example, we're working on a civil construction project and we don't know what a compaction test is. We could just ask ChatGPT to explain it to us, rather than having to go ask a mentor or management or do research on Google. We just go direct to ChatGPT and tell it exactly what we don't understand. As another example, if you're working on a renewable energy project and you're working on a wind farm, but you don't understand how wind turbines work, in 60 seconds of quick research, ChatGPT can explain you exactly what you need to know. So ChatGPT is incredibly good at teaching technical concepts. So I've asked ChatGPT in this example, how does a wind turbine work? And I've given it the prompt that I wanted to explain it to someone with no technical background. And it's just given us a really simple answer. It's told us how turbines work, how control systems work, how they adjust to the wind. And as I said, in 60 seconds, we can quickly research and get a really, really solid technical answer. Now, ChatGPT is particularly good at technical content because it's objective. There's a single source of truth. And in that way, it can simply consolidate the information it's been trained on and give us the best possible answer. The final use case for education is to educate yourself or others on project-specific information. So this is the context of the project. The idea is that you give ChatGPT all this context, and then it can tell you what you don't know. This is similar to when we were talking about summarizing information. We just upload all the project documents to ChatGPT, and then we ask it what we want to know. And this is also a really useful tool when onboarding new people. So you have a new project team member working, and you need to quickly explain to them everything they need to know about the project. Simple. Get ChatGPT to write them a summary. And we'll use the same example we used in a previous section of what is the critical information the planner needs to know about the project. Based on the project information and context we've provided ChatGPT, they're going to give us a super simple summary that we can easily pass on to them and get them up to speed. Now, if you've worked on projects, you'll understand how important it is being able to do this. You've always got new team members starting, people who aren't familiar with the project, and it's just a really, really simple and straightforward way that you can onboard people quickly and get them up to speed. Welcome to section 3. Now that we've covered the generic uses of ChatGPT, in section 3, we're going to look at specifically how you can use ChatGPT to manage a project. This is where we're going to look at each of the different domains of project management, things like project integration management, project scope management, project quality management, and project cost management. And we're going to break each of these topics down and look at specifically how you can use ChatGPT to be a better project manager. We're going to get into the specific applications of ChatGPT to project management. we're going to be leveraging all of the same generic uses we learned about in section 2. So we'll use ChatGPT for content creation, in project risk management, in project cost management, in project schedule management. But we're going to be looking at the specific applications you can use as a project manager to better manage your project. Okay, so to get started with section 3, we're going to talk about project integration management. So what is project integration management? Well, project integration management is the coordination of each of the project elements to ensure effective operation and alignment. Another way of thinking about it is project integration management is the glue that binds all of the other project domains together. So we think about scope, time, risk, cost, quality, resources, communication, procurement, stakeholder management. Project integration management is the discipline that brings all of these other disciplines together. So they make sure our schedule aligns with our budget, aligns with our quality management plan, and aligns with our procurement. Processes and areas of project integration management are developing the project charter, developing the project management plan, directing and managing project work, monitoring and controlling the project, managing change, and closing the project. And we're going to look at how ChatGPT can help with each of these different domains of project integration management. The first one we're going to look at is developing the project management plan or charter. So how can ChatGPT help with this? Well, we can give ChatGPT project information, as we've already looked at. We can upload all of the project documentation, the scope of works, drawings, although it can't really read drawings. It can just read the notes on drawings, any templates and formats we want it output in, and then we can just ask ChatGPT, based on the information we provided you in the templates, we want you to prepare the project management plan or the project charter and provide other project management plans and get to integrate all of these plans together. But the ultimate output that ChatGPT is going to be able to deliver us is to write the project management plan or project charter. So as an example, we've asked ChatGPT to write the project charter, and it's done a pretty good job. It's output the introduction, it's given the purpose and justification, the project scope, explain the breakdown of the budget and funding, the project organization, the project risks and mitigation strategies, the communication plan, and simply based on the information we've previously put into it, it's developed the full project charter. Next example is how can we use ChatGPT to direct and manage project work? So we can ask ChatGPT to transfer the scope of works into a list of tasks, and then we can allocate these tasks to people. So that's quite a useful thing to be able to do. We've got the scope, and we want to know what are all the tasks the project team has to do to be able to finish the project. Based on ChatGPT being trained on the content and uploading all the project documents, it can make an attempt at turning this into a set of tasks. Then we can also set up ChatGPT to follow up and set automated reminders. So we could say, produce a schedule that every week this task is followed up. Now, we'd have to be the ones manually doing the follow-up unless we use one of the custom GPTs that allowed us to do this. But for now, we just consider that we would be doing this and we can just use it to help schedule it. And the other thing we can do is we can actually ask ChatGPT to allocate resources. So if we say, here's our project team, here's the 5 people on our project team, I'm the project manager, there's a project planner, this person, there's a procurement manager, and then based on the list of tasks, we can say to ChatGPT, allocate these tasks to specific people. As an example, we've gone to our Greenway expansion project and we told ChatGPT we need to direct and manage project work, and we're asking it to turn the project scope into a list of tasks, and we've given an example of the type of tasks we want to do. ChatGPT's listing out all the different tasks under different domains. So we've got permits and regulatory approvals, procurement and contract management, project execution and monitoring. And under each of these headings, it's listing out a complete set of subtasks. And basically, it's telling us everything we would need to do to manage the project. Now, obviously, we're going to double check this. We're going to make sure it's comprehensive. It's our job to interpret it and make sure it's correct. But ChatGPT's had a pretty good first go at creating us this task list. The next project integration management function we can use ChatGPT for is monitoring and controlling. Now, we can get ChatGPT to identify metrics to track the project. We can use it to analyze data, as we've already spoken about. So if we had performance data, say how much we were spending versus how much work we were doing, We can get ChatGPT to do the earned value management for us. We can use ChatGPT to produce reports, and we can use ChatGPT to identify variances. So where the plan isn't meeting the actual, we can get ChatGPT to analyze the data and tell us where this is happening. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT to create a monthly report. So we wanted to create the format of a monthly report that we want to record in our budget, our schedule, our stakeholder management, and it's created a template for us. It's going to tell us, it's set it up with an executive summary. So when management first look at the report, what they need to do, it's given us a budget status, and all we'd have to do to get ChatGPT to create the report each month is just give it the information it needs, and it would be able to calculate and populate this report. For us, it's simply created the outline that accurately represents the status of our project. What we can use ChatGPT for is change control. What's change control? It's when something in the project changes and we need to work out the impact and how to manage it. Projects always involve change. We can't perfectly plan and prepare for what's happening, and there's always risk and uncertainty that results in things changing. ChatGPT can help us to manage this process, can help us to understand the change control process, quantify the impacts, and maintain a change log. As an example, here's a simulated change event on our project. So one of the local government representatives has asked us to include an additional electronic signage as part of the project. Now, ChatGPT is going to guide us through the process for how we manage this change. It's telling us exactly what we need to do, how we need to assess the impact, determine what we're going to do about it, monitor and report on progress. It's basically telling us how to manage this change. Finally, ChatGPT can be very useful for closing out a project or phase. For example, ChatGPT can, based on its understanding of the scope and what we've told it, we can ask ChatGPT to prepare us a project closure checklist. So a list of things we go through to check all the work's been done correctly, and then we're ready to hand the project over. We can ask ChatGPT to compile lessons learned. So we could ask ChatGPT to generate us a checklist that we send out to all the project members, and we want them to provide their lessons learned and feedback. Then we can get ChatGPT to amalgamate all these responses and produce a lessons learned register. And finally, we could even use ChatGPT to prepare handover training. So with the deliverable we've created with our project, say we need to train the users on how to work it, we could ask ChatGPT to produce us a presentation that trains them on it. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT, can you please create a project closure checklist that covers all of the key items that we need to hand over? And it's gone ahead and done this. It's got the Greenway expansion project closure checklist. It's got administrative closure and a list of things we'd have to check, financial closure, contract closures, handover and training. And each of these items we'd then be able to go through and check are fully complete and that the project is in fact ready to hand over. So ChatGPT has helped us generate this list of things to check that the project's completed. In this section, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used to manage project scope. Project scope management is the process we follow to ensure all the project work and only the project work gets completed. Project scope management occurs in several defined stages. And we're going to look at how ChatGPT can help us to manage each of these individual stages. The first one we've got is plan scope management. Next, collecting requirements. Next, defining scope, then validating scope, and then finally controlling scope during project execution. ChatGPT can help in each of these individual stages. So the first one, planning scope management. So ChatGPT can help us to actually write a scope management plan. Now, we've already seen a lot how ChatGPT can be used as a writing tool, so it's really going to be nothing new. But when we're asking ChatGPT to write a scope management plan, we just want to be careful we define exactly what we want it to do. So I typically say, ChatGPT, write a scope management plan, but make sure you cover how will scope be defined, validated, and controlled. So that's talking about the general process of scope management. But then also you wanted to define the criteria for scope acceptance. So it's basically going to include in this plan how project scope is going to be managed rather than defining the specific project scope. As an example, I've prompted ChatGPT to write a scope management plan covering these two key points, how scope is going to be defined and how it's going to be accepted. Covered off with an introduction, a scope definition. It's got project objectives, talks about a work breakdown structure. Now remember, you can give ChatGPT any template you want it to follow. For this example, we haven't given it a template, we've just told it what we want the document to cover. But if your specific organization, your project has templates or performer documents you want to populate, you can simply upload these to ChatGPT and say, fill out this template. Next, we can use ChatGPT to help us to collect requirements. So we can use it to identify requirements by reviewing the project documentation, or we could collect requirements with feedback surveys to stakeholders or key project sponsors. We can use ChatGPT for brainstorming, like we've already spoken about. We could get ChatGPT to define project scope based on what we tell it we want to achieve. And then we can get ChatGPT to summarize these requirements into a concise scope statement. For this example, we've asked ChatGPT, can you please summarize all the project requirements? And we're defining a requirement as anything that needs to be done to complete the project. So we're defining it both as the work, but also any deliverables we need to provide to hand over the project. For example, if we have to provide training at the end of it, we want ChatGPT to include that in its definition of scope. Again, this comes back to prompting. We just want to be careful that when we give ChatGPT an instruction, we're clearly defining it, what we want it to do, and how we interpret the definitions we're giving it. So if we're telling it to define scope, we're also saying we want it to define scope as the work that needs to be done, but then also any requirements to complete the project. After we've collected requirements, the next thing we can do is get ChatGPT to define scope. We want it to tell us, based on the requirements we've identified for the project, we want it to talk about what the work we're going to be doing is and how we're going to do it. And we can get ChatGPT to create this and put it into a work breakdown structure, which is our comprehensive list of the entire project scope. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT to create a comprehensive work breakdown structure. We've also given it a format and a template that we want it to follow the work breakdown structure. Now, when we asked it to do this the first time, it gave an error. It gave a whole lot of garbage data that didn't fit the format. But we've asked it to do it again. It's done the same thing. We asked it a third time and told it the format was wrong. Then eventually it created the correct answer. Now that's why you have to iterate with ChatGPT. Don't be afraid to tell it the answer it gives you is wrong. And then as a final solution, we got this awesome work breakdown structure that covers every single project activity in the exact format that we specified that we want it in. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for, once we've created our work breakdown structure, we've defined scope, we've identified all the different tasks we need to complete the project, we can use ChatGPT to validate scope. Anybody who's managed a project knows that one of the real challenges project managers have is working out what is and isn't in scope and then communicating that to stakeholders. ChatGPT can help you to validate project scope. Say, for example, a client asks you to do additional work that already isn't in scope. You can ask ChatGPT, based on your understanding of the content, is this in scope? And if not, or if it is, what relevant section of the documentation or contract does it say this is it? And that way you can actually respond to the client with evidence of why this is or isn't in scope, and ChatGPT can help you quickly find and identify the relevant documents. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT and told it we've been asked to install a CCTV camera. Is this in project scope or is it not? And then ChatGPT has gone through the context we've provided it, the documentation we've given it, and it's done an analysis of whether the change is or isn't in scope and what we should do about it. ChatGPT has told us the change isn't in scope and we should go through the change control process. What are some key challenges in project scope management and how can ChatGPT help us solve them? Well, the first one we looked at is scope creep. So ChatGPT can help us to validate project scope and then communicate why something is or isn't in scope to the person who's requested the change. That's how it's going to help us to validate and control scope. Next one is miscommunication. So as we've already spoken about, ChatGPT helps us to summarize, to educate, to present information to people. So it can help us to clearly communicate scope to different people. The final thing is projects are complicated. They involve technical issues, project management issues, and these all feed into the project scope and the work we're going to be doing, making it complicated. And ChatGPT, because we can train it on this massive set of project information and data, we can use it to help make the project scope much more simpler and help everyone understand exactly what it is we're going to be doing and what is or isn't in scope. In this section, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used for project schedule management. Now, project scheduling is my favorite domain of project management. I think it's by far the most interesting because it's where you map out how exactly you're going to deliver a project, how does everything fit together, what steps does it have to be done into. And this is where, in my opinion, as a project manager, you can really add a lot of value because your job as a project manager is ultimately coordinating and managing the project work. The best tool to do this is a schedule. And ChatGPT, in my opinion, can add a lot of value to this process. Project scheduling is the process of planning and controlling the project duration to ensure that it finishes on time. Why does scheduling matter and why is it so important? Well, put simply, projects need to finish on time. If we're doing a project, it's because it serves a need. The quicker we can deliver the value, the quicker we can address that need, the better the project's going to be. Say, for example, we're building a solar farm. The quicker we can get it built and start generating electricity, the more money we're going to make. If we're creating a piece of software that addresses an accounting issue, the quicker we can build the software and address the issue, then the more value that's going to be created by the project. So, project scheduling is all about how you coordinate and manage the project work to ultimately finish the project scope faster. We can break project schedule management down into a couple of separate domains, and then we're going to look at how ChatGPT can play a critical role in helping us to manage each of these domains. So it can help with planning, so developing our schedule management plan, then to actually develop the schedule, to then read and interpret the schedule. Say somebody else created the schedule and we're just trying to read and interpret and extract information from it. Then we can use it to implement the schedule. And then finally, we can use it to control the schedule. So planning schedule management is the process of creating the schedule management plan. In the same week, we created a scope management plan that explained the processes with which we were going to how we were going to define, control, and manage project scope. The schedule management plan is the same thing. It's the policies, procedures, and documentation for executing the schedule. And ChatGPT can help us to prepare this document. And we've just simply given ChatGPT the prompt. Write a schedule management plan to document the policies and procedures with which we're going to manage the schedule. And for our project, it's gone ahead and done that. It's talking about the different policies we're going to use, how we're going to have a baseline schedule, the accuracy of the baseline schedule, the different roles and responsibilities to manage the schedule, and the schedule control processes. And we can simply go through, review and edit this and correct it to be what it needs to be. And if you're working on a project which has a specific template the schedule management plan has to follow, then you can upload that and get it to fill it out in your format. Next, we can use ChatGPT to help us to actually create the schedule. So this is schedule development. So schedule development occurs in a couple of separate steps. So first we need to define our activities. So we need to define the list of tasks that need to be done to complete the project, which we actually did in the last section when we were talking about scope management and creating a work breakdown structure. We need to then sequence these tasks. So this is where we put them in the correct order, identify the dependencies for them. Then we need to estimate the durations of each of the individual tasks. And then we need to put this all together to create a schedule. For this example, we're going to actually get ChatGPT to create a project schedule for us. So we've prompted ChatGPT to create a project schedule. Now, we're not going to ask it to create the Gantt chart, but we're going to tell it exactly what format we want the information. We want to export it in the format where we could simply enter this into Microsoft Project or another scheduling software. So we need to get it to define the tasks. We need to get it to define the start and finish dates, the estimated durations, and the linkages between activities. And we've also told it how big we want the schedule to be. So we said it should be around roughly 30 slides. And if you're creating a high-level program, that's probably about right. But for this example, we've simply said to create a schedule and output it in a table in the format we need it to, where we could put it into something like Microsoft Project. And it's gone ahead and created a pretty decent schedule. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for, which I personally find really, really useful, is to read the schedule. So if you're working on any sort of major infrastructure project or major project, you'll probably find the overall project schedule becomes a bit of a beast. It'll probably have hundreds, if not thousands of lines, all with different activities and linkages. You can think of this as just a big data set. You don't necessarily need to look at a schedule as a Gantt chart. You could just see it's a big list of different activities with different durations and linkages. When you're looking at the project schedule in terms of your role as a project manager to coordinate and manage the project works, there's probably only specific bits of information that you want to extract from the schedule. For example, you might want to know what date a certain contractor has to come to site so you can start planning for it a couple of weeks before. All you could do is you could upload the data to ChatGPT and get it to tell you what date the contractor is coming to site and what activities are preceding it. As an example, based on the schedule we got ChatGPT to create, we just asked ChatGPT what date is the road contractor coming to site, or how long is allowed for the procurement of the contractor. So it saves us having to go through the schedule ourselves. It's simply extracting the information and telling us what we want to know. So now we've developed the project schedule, we know how to read a project schedule using ChatGPT. The next thing we need to do is we need to put this plan into action. So as our role as a project manager, we need to coordinate and manage the project works so it actually happens. Now, ChatGPT is quite useful at doing this. It can help you with implementing pool planning, so looking at an activity that's coming up and working out everything that needs to be done before. And it basically can help you turn the schedule into a set of actions and tasks. Now, this fits into what we were saying in project integration management. It's a very similar concept. We can use the schedule to help plan out specific tasks and when they need to be done by, and then we can allocate them to individuals. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT, can you create a checklist of everything that we need to do before the lighting contractor comes to site? And it's gone ahead and done this. It's given us a checklist that we can go through. And for the lighting contractor to start on a certain date, here's everything that we'd need to do beforehand to make sure that this happens. Now we've put our plan into action, the next thing we need to do to manage the schedule is to monitor and control performance. We need to make sure that work is getting done like we planned. ChatGPT has a role in monitoring and controlling performance. We can use it to upload data, so we could collect progress data on a whole lot of activities, upload it to ChatGPT, and get it to produce us a summary report, or get it to perform earned value management calculations, which we looked at previously, compare plan versus actual, but then also to update our schedule baseline. So based on when tasks are actually finished, to recalculate future activity start and finish dates. So in this case, we're just going to ask ChatGPT to help us to create some KPIs we can use that to assess project performance. So it's got things like cost performance index, schedule performance index, stakeholder satisfaction index. So ChatGPT is just giving us some KPIs we could use. So to quickly wrap up, what are some key challenges with project scheduling and how can ChatGPT be used to help us overcome and manage these? Well, the first one I see a lot is accurate estimate durations. ChatGPT can help you to estimate the duration of tasks. You simply to explain the task and what you're looking for. It can tell you what factors would impact the duration. ChatGPT can help with resource allocation, so it can help you understand what the critical path is and what the tasks you should be focusing on are. It can help you then to implement the schedule, as we spoke about, turning the schedule into a set of a to-do list. And then finally, it can help to keep the schedule relevant. So it makes it easy to collect information, what information you need, and to update and maintain the schedule. Now, these are all specific challenges I see every day on projects where ChatGPT can help you to plan, manage, and overcome these. In this section, I'm going to be talking all about project cost management using ChatGPT. We'll look at how ChatGPT can actually help you to estimate and then control project costs during delivery. Let's start off by defining project cost management. So, cost management is the process of accurately estimating costs and then delivering the project within its budget. So there's two sides to cost management. Number one is working out how much something is going to cost, and then when you decide to do it, delivering that package of works, delivering that project for less than the budget you established, so less than the estimate you created. I probably don't need to spend much money to you explaining why money matters to projects. But at the end of the day, the only reason somebody would decide to do a project is because the value that's delivered by the project is greater than the cost. So for this to be true, there's two sides to it. Number one, we have to accurately work out how much something's going to cost to begin with. Then we need to deliver the project for less than what we thought it was going to cost. So for less than our budget. So ultimately, We decide to do a project because the value it creates is greater than the cost of delivering it. Breaking this down into the two sides of project cost management, we've got estimating costs, so accurately working out how much something is going to cost, and then delivering the project for less than this cost. So those are the two sides of cost management, and we're going to see how ChatGPT can be used to help both of these processes. To estimate costs, there's 3 stages. So to begin with, we need to develop an approach. We need to work out how we're going to choose to estimate costs for the projects, come up with a methodology. So we could either use a top-down parametric estimate, or we could do, if we need a more detailed estimate, we could do a bottom-up. So that's step number 1. We need to develop our approach. The next thing we need to do is we need to create our task list. So if we're doing a bottom-up estimate, we have to clearly define every single task we're going to have to complete the project. The last step is we need to apply costs to these tasks. So to do that, we need to work out what resources we require, how much these resources cost, and how long we need them for. Now, ChatGPT can help with each of these separate steps. Step number 1 is to develop our approach to creating the project estimate. So ChatGPT can be incredibly helpful with doing this. It can explain the methodology of how to estimate costs, so we can use it as an education tool. Say we've never created a project budget before, we can ask ChatGPT to show us how, and then it can also help us to identify the correct form of estimating. So there's a couple of different estimating techniques we could use. If we need a high level, roughly correct order of magnitude estimate, we could use a parametric or comparable estimate. Or if we need a really, really detailed estimate, we could use a bottom-up estimate. Now, ChatGPT can help us work out which one is more appropriate for our project. As an example, we've told ChatGPT to imagine we're working for the construction contractor that's quoting to deliver the project. So in this situation, ChatGPT's advised us to use a bottom-up estimate because we need a really, really accurate estimate to form part of a lump sum contract. Assuming we need to do a bottom-up estimate for our project to create an accurate cost estimate, ChatGPT can now help us with the next stages. So developing our task list, and we've already seen how ChatGPT can be used to create a project task list when we looked at scheduling, when we looked at procurement, when we looked at creating a work breakdown structure. ChatGPT can help us break down the project scope into a series of tasks, and then against each of these tasks, help us to work out what resources we need to complete the project. So for example, if excavation is one of the activities, then we're going to need an excavator, we're going to need a laborer, we're going to need an operator, and we're going to need a truck to remove the spoil. ChatGPT can work out what each of these resources we need to complete the project are. As an example here, we've asked ChatGPT to create us a detailed work breakdown structure for our project. So here it has created a table with every activity we need to complete the project. Now, as we all know, ChatGPT can make mistakes and is very likely to miss important things. So obviously we would need to check over this because missed scope in our estimate is going to mean missed money in our budget. Now we've created our task list and against each of the tasks worked out what resources we require. The next step is then to apply a productivity and a cost to them. So if you can imagine what we're trying to do here, if we have a task in our work breakdown structure, so we need an excavator for the excavation scope, we need to know how long we need the excavator for and how much it costs per unit of time. So obviously it's always going to be more accurate to get quotes from the market, to get proper information, but ChatGPT is actually quite good at roughly guessing cost. So if you look what we can use ChatGPT for, we can actually ask ChatGPT, so based on the area we're in, the market we're working on, we can just ask ChatGPT to estimate the cost for us. We can also ask it to identify applicable rates, both cost rates, but also production rates. So if we want to know, again, using the example of excavation, and now I work in construction, so I'm using a lot of examples for construction, but these same principles could apply to any project. So, but if we're using the example of construction and we want to work out how long it's going to take to dig a trench, if we know how wide and deep the trench is, we can actually ask ChatGPT to estimate a reasonable production rate. Now, this information is never going to be as good as information you can get from experts or information you can get from project historical data, but it can be a really, really useful starting point. Then it can also be used to track and manage your assumptions. So anyone who's done estimating knows a lot of assumptions go into creating an estimate, and ChatGPT can be used to help track and manage these. As an example, I've told ChatGPT I want to estimate the cost of excavation in Melbourne, Australia. The excavation scope requires us to dig 300 mil deep, 5 kilometers long and 3 meters wide. So ChatGPT's actually gone through and calculated the costs for us using standard rates you'd find in Melbourne, Australia. So it's defined the scope, it's worked out what equipment's required, it's worked out what labor's required, it's calculated the total worked hours. So it said we've got 4,500 meters cubed of soil to move at 60 meters cubed an hour. It's come up with 75 hours. So it's calculated how long we need these resources for. Then it's assumed $50 an hour for labor, $1,200 a day for plant. Then it's also included disposal costs. So it's worked out how much would cost to do the excavation. That it's factored in a rate of $20 per meters cubed of disposal. It's factored in 10% for additional overheads, and it's given us a total estimated cost. Now we could review these workings and tell ChatGPT where they're wrong. We could say, recalculate the costs based on a labor cost of $40 per hour, or recalculate the costs excluding the additional overheads. We can give this feedback to ChatGPT to improve the estimation process. But you can see here how ChatGPT just automatically follows a methodical approach to calculate costs with very limited information and very limited guidance from us. Once we've estimated our costs, we've created our budget. So, as I mentioned before, stage 2 of project cost management is then delivering the project scope for less than this budget. So if we look at how ChatGPT can help, there's really two sides to it. We can use it with tracking and earned value management. So if we want to collate costs, we could upload invoices to ChatGPT and ask them to group these costs. We could even use it for earned value management. So when we're looking at data management on projects, we looked at an earned value management example. We uploaded the data to ChatGPT and we got it to calculate our cost performance index and our schedule performance index. On the other side of things, a big part of managing project costs is dealing with change. Why does change matter? Because our estimate is built on certain assumptions and conditions. If those change during project delivery, those are the sort of circumstances that are going to lead to us overrunning our costs. So ChatGPT can be good at guiding us through a change management process. As an example, say we picked up an error in our estimate and the design depth of the road was 400 mil, not 300 mil. We've now asked ChatGPT to recalculate the costs and what the additional cost is from this missed change. It's gone through the entire estimating process again and worked this out at $35,000. So just that simple error in our initial assumptions where the design depth was 400 mil, not 300 mil. We've had to go through and recalculate our costs and worked out our costs have increased by $35,000. So that's an example how ChatGPT can help to manage change during project delivery. To summarize and conclude, some key challenges I see all the time with project cost management are cost overruns due to unforeseen circumstances. Well, we've already discussed how ChatGPT can help you to analyze risks, assess risks, understand project documentation, create work breakdown structures that are comprehensive. So ChatGPT can help us to plan and make sure we're covering everything that could possibly come up. Next, we've seen how ChatGPT can help us to create a methodical approach to estimating and then also to calculate costs directly. So ChatGPT can help address inaccurate estimates. Next, we've seen how ChatGPT can help us to track our budget by tracking our costs and turning this data into metrics like earned value management. And finally, we've seen how ChatGPT can help with dealing with change. It can help us to track our costs, can help us to calculate the costs of different changes. So overall, ChatGPT is an incredibly useful tool for managing project costs. In this section, we're going to talk all about project quality management. What is quality management? Well, quality management is the process of verifying and validating that what the project is delivering meets requirements. Basically, we can think of this as a systematic way of checking and verifying that what we're creating meets the original requirements for the project. Why does quality matter? Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people you could ask that question and they'd tell you it's just an administrative exercise, it doesn't really create any value. Well, quality management isn't just a tick and flick exercise. It's not just filling out paperwork so we can show the client we've done things correctly. Quality at its core is about verifying and validating that what we've created meets the original requirements. It's our way of checking that what we're building matches what was originally planned. And if we think about this at a more fundamental level, we decide to do a project to create value. Quality is about checking and double checking that what we have created by delivering the project has actually created value. Project quality management is broken into two parts. So there's one part, which is the planning piece, which is all about setting up our quality assurance system. So it's about determining how we're going to control quality for the project. The second part is when we're delivering the project, it's putting in place these systems and actually doing our quality control checks. So it's doing our inspections, doing our testing, doing our audits, the act to check and verify that what the project is creating meets the original requirements. Let's now look at how ChatGPT can be used to help us plan quality. Now, we can use ChatGPT to write our project quality management plan in the same way we used it to write our scope management plan or schedule management plan. It's an incredibly good tool at writing and producing documents. And if we're working on a project, we have a specific template or a specific structure, we can give it that structure and tell it what to include in it. The other thing we can use it for is setting up our quality assurance system. With ChatGPT's understanding of the project scope, we can give ChatGPT the project requirements. We can provide it the technical specifications, the documents it needs to understand. Then we can get ChatGPT to help us identify what these requirements are and come up with ways where we can check and verify that we've identified these requirements and then we've fully met these requirements. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT just to write a quality management plan for the project, and as you can see, based on its understanding of the project scope, it's outlined the quality objectives, the standards and regulations, it's defined roles and responsibilities, defined a quality control process, and it's come up with monitoring and reporting requirements. And overall, it's done a pretty good job at writing our quality management plan. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for is to set up our quality assurance systems. So this is where we look at the specific project scope, the documentation, the requirements, and we get ChatGPT to help us define our specific inspection and testing requirements, plan out our audits, and these sorts of things. So it's looking at the specific project scope, working out specific quality control activities we're going to do to verify that things have been done correctly. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT to write an inspection and test plan for the excavation activity. I've given it a format it needs to output it in, and I've given it the sorts of tests we want it to do. And again, if your project format's different, you can alter the format, but overall, it's done a pretty good job of listing out all the activities and defining what checks we're going to do at each stage to ensure they're done correctly. And it's also listed out who's going to be responsible for doing those checks. If you've got other requirements in your ITPs, for example, if you have to nominate frequency of inspections, you could provide ChatGPT more information and it'll do an equally good job at filling out the inspection and test plan. Once we've set up our quality assurance systems, we've written our project quality management plan, we've created all our inspection and test plans, so we've worked out all the checks we're going to do, we move into the delivery phase. And in this phase, we need to control quality. So this is when we're actually going and doing the inspection and testing. There's several things ChatGPT can help with in this stage, like scheduling out our quality control activities, for example, planning these out in time. Say, for example, the earthworks is going to take 3 months and we have to do 4 audits during the earthworks. It can help with simple calculations and scheduling like this. It can also be used to collect and track data. So say we get 100 compaction tests done for our earthworks, we can upload these to ChatGPT and get it to check they're all correct, get it to check we've got enough tests, so that's helping with these sorts of things. And then when things go wrong, we end up with non-conformances, we can use ChatGPT to help guide us through the non-conformance process and complete a root cause analysis. A root cause analysis is where we do an investigation into what went wrong to try and identify the root cause of the problem. Once we identify the root cause of the problem, if we then address that, the assumption is that we'll fix the same thing from happening again. ChatGPT can coach us through the process of completing a root cause analysis and coach us through doing things like the 5 whys, can give us an examples, or we can just feed ChatGPT the project information and get it to do it for us. It can help us to complete non-conformance reports, and it can also identify potential corrective actions that we can then implement in the future. As an example, again, using the earthworks from the project, I've told ChatGPT we've had 5 compaction tests fail. What can we do about it? And it's come up with 5 reasonable suggestions of what could have possibly caused this problem. Things like errors in the testing equipment, errors in the compaction methodology we're using for construction. Overall, it's provided some pretty good suggestions of what went wrong and what we could do about it. So here you can quite simply see how ChatGPT can be used to help identify root causes. To summarize, these are 3 challenges I see on every single project and how I think ChatGPT does a pretty good job of helping deal with them. The first is planning quality assurance. When people set up the project, maybe they do a good job of writing the project quality management plan, but whenever people get into the detail of writing inspection and test plans, they always miss requirements, they always miss steps in the process, and ChatGPT is just a really good tool at guiding you through that process. The next is ChatGPT is very good at recording information, reviewing test results, and quickly identifying where testing's failing. So ChatGPT is a good data analysis tool, and it's quite easy when you get hundreds of test results for a project to simply miss the source of failure. So in that case, we can use ChatGPT to make the data analysis process easy. And finally, ChatGPT is very good at writing our non-conformances into a report and helping us to identify root causes and propose corrective actions. So it's very good at handling non-conformances. Now, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can be used to help with project resource management. So what is project resource management? Well, project resource management is organizing, scheduling, and managing a project's resources efficiently and effectively. Why does resource management matter on a project? Well, the simple answer to that question is resources drive absolutely everything. Resources drive our schedule, resources drive our quality standards, and resources drive our cost. If you think about it, at the end of the day, a project is a whole set of tasks completed by different people or different things. Resource management is all about how you effectively use these project resources to get the work done. So if we're using the resources effectively and inefficiently, then it's going to delay our schedule and increase our cost. If we're not controlling our resources properly, we're using the wrong resources for the task, it's going to impact our quality and the scope we deliver with the project. So ultimately, projects are all about managing and controlling resources efficiently and effectively. And so project resource management is a critical domain of project management. We can break project resource management down into 3 parts. First is planning. So this is planning your resource management and estimating what resources you're going to need to complete the project. The second part is then acquiring these resources. So finding them, their internal resources or people you have to hire. That's things like the human resources process. Or if they're external resources, that might be something like a procurement process. The final step is controlling these resources. So managing them efficiently and effectively to make sure they're working on the right tasks and getting the correct work done. So the first step of the process where ChatGPT can help us is ChatGPT can help us to identify the necessary resources to complete the project and then help us to allocate these tasks. So like we looked at in estimating, like we looked at in scheduling, from our work breakdown structure, ChatGPT can help us to identify all the resources we need to complete the task. As a very simple example, I've just asked ChatGPT, for the work breakdown structure we've created, what are the resources we need to complete the project tasks? And against each of the items in the work breakdown structure, it can simply provide a list of resources. The other thing ChatGPT can be useful for, particularly when you have a more complicated schedule and a more complicated scope, ChatGPT can help you create resource histograms. So if we create a project schedule, we know what resources are required against each task, we can get ChatGPT to create a data file that we then use to create a resource histogram. Could be in ChatGPT directly, or we could use something like Microsoft Excel. So if you imagine project schedule spaces activities out a long time, against each activity, there's different resources required. So we could use that, get ChatGPT to combine those bits of information and create a histogram. As an example, I've prompted ChatGPT, create a histogram of the excavators required for the project. Now, it obviously doesn't have enough information to do this because we don't have a detailed resource allocation, a detailed schedule, but it's simply explained us the process, how we could create this information if we need it. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for is then acquiring these resources. So in the previous step, we worked out all the resources we were going to need to complete the project. You then actually go out and acquire these resources. So ChatGPT can help us in a lot of different ways, even if it's as simple as setting up a tracking system and monitoring whether we've acquired these resources, or then specifically if we're acquiring internal resources, they can help us with human resources functions like writing a job description, writing a position description and things like that. Or it can help us with if we need to acquire external goods and services through the procurement process. So we'll cover that when we talk about project procurement, but we could use ChatGPT to write a scope of works, for example, to describe what we need to buy so we can send this out to a vendor. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT to create a resource tracking table where we can input the resources we're using each week and accurately track how many we need versus how many we use. So this is an example of just using ChatGPT for its tracking and data analysis function and compiling information. Okay, to quickly wrap up, here are some challenges I see in a lot of projects where I think ChatGPT can play a pretty big role in helping. So on most projects, you see shortages of resources and conflicts between resources. So this is where the same resource is needed at lots of different points in time. There's always a struggle between the alignment of skills and needs. So when you have specific people with specific skills, but they're needed in two places at once. Next thing is projects often require a lot more resources than we originally thought. Even something as simple as earthworks on a road project really takes a lot of different tasks, a lot of different resources. Another one, which is always a challenge on projects, is when you need continuous allocation of resources. So you might have an excavator, and if it's on site, you want it to be continually working. And ultimately, the way I think ChatGPT helps the most is it just helps you plan in a lot of detail what resources you're going to need. Now, often because people are caught up during the planning phase doing other things, they don't devote resource allocation the time it needs. And I just find ChatGPT makes the whole process very, very easy. So rather than having to spend a lot of time writing out a long work breakdown structure, identifying every single thing you need, ChatGPT just accelerates the process so that we can give resource management the time and attention it deserves. The next application we're going to look at of ChatGPT for project management is communications management. We're going to look at how ChatGPT can help us to communicate more effectively. At its core, project communications management is simply the distribution and collection of information. That's all it is. It's telling people things and receiving information from them. I've already spoken about how ChatGPT is a writing tool, how ChatGPT is a data analysis tool. So a lot of the applications we've already looked at center around communications management. But here, we'll try and specifically look at the different communications channels used on a project and how ChatGPT can make your life easier as a project manager. Quickly to start with, why does communication matter on projects? Well, unless you're working on an incredibly tiny project and you're the only person working on it, ultimately, as the project manager, your job is not to do the project work. It's to manage and coordinate other people doing the work. The only way you can do that is communication. You're going to have to direct and manage others. You're also going to have to receive input and information back for them. ChatGPT can be used to enhance communication in lots of different ways. So it can be used with writing and expression. And we've already spoken so much about all the different documents ChatGPT could help us to write and prepare, and particularly how important the writing function is with project management. It can be used to translate between different communication forms. So you get a document and you want to turn it into an email, or you want to summarize something to someone. It's very good at that. Can be used to direct and manage project work. Can be used for creating reports or distributing information to stakeholders. Can be used for tracking documentation. Can be used for creating reminders and setting up follow-up sequences. And then if you look at some more advanced applications and integrations with other apps, it can be used to actually automate elements of communication. If we're talking about writing and expression, which we've already spoken about a ton, but ChatGPT can be used for content creation. Even if ChatGPT doesn't do the writing, we can use ChatGPT to simplify and proofread what we've written so it's easier for others to understand. And ChatGPT can be used for things like creating meeting minutes. Something ChatGPT is really effective at is adjusting between different communication forms. So say, for example, someone sent us a report and we want the critical information distributed to our team. We could upload the report to ChatGPT and get it to summarize and extract the key bits of information and reformat that as an email and distribute that to the project team. So that's just an example of how you can translate between different communication forms with ChatGPT. You could even turn your work breakdown structure into a presentation. Really, it's up to you how you choose to use it, but ChatGPT, when you're looking at communication, is very good at translating information from one communication form to another. As an example, I've just asked ChatGPT, can you please turn our work breakdown structure into a presentation? And it's turned it into 10 slides, each with several dot points. Now we can put that into a presentation. That's a much easier format to explain to the team how the project's broken down. The next thing we can use ChatGPT for in terms of communication is to help us to direct and manage project work. So if we, for example, we take the task list, we could turn this into a task list centered around tasks for the project team. And we could tell ChatGPT the structure of our project team, work out who to allocate these tasks for. And we could set up a tracking system. And we could ask, for example, the project planner, each week you have to produce these documents, and then we track that they've produced them. So this just helps us to systematize a lot of these different processes and make things easy for ourselves as the project manager. As an example, I've asked ChatGPT, can you please create a list of tasks for the project planner? So this is looking specifically at the schedule, and we want the list of tasks to be in the form of weekly and monthly. And so as an example, it's gone through, it's broken the tasks out, it's given a monthly set of tasks, and it's given a weekly set of tasks. Again, using ChatGPT as a content creation tool, we can also use ChatGPT to help us to create reports. So say we have to create a report to management to explain how the project's going, or we want to just create a general informative report to send to the community or stakeholders, we could ask ChatGPT to write it this. We just have to provide it the information and it'll reformat it in a way we want it and the way we can distribute it. Another one, which is very unique to communication, but incredibly important, is documentation and record keeping. So much of the time on a project, we'll send an email to a supplier, we'll have a meeting with them, we'll discuss things at the meeting. And those decisions and discussion points that we've spoken about can suddenly have costs, schedule, quality implications. And if there's no records of it, down the line, if a disagreement breaks out, it can turn into one of those situations where it's he said, she said, and there's disagreement about the truth of what happened. Well, ChatGPT can be used to summarize information. So we had a recording from the meeting. We could extract that, put that into a text document and summarize it. And we could get ChatGPT to quickly and easily turn it into a set of meeting minutes that we send around after the meeting, where we have a digital record of what was discussed. So we can use that function of ChatGPT to write and summarize information to make it easy for us to stay on top of our documentation and record keeping. Again, as we've already looked at, ChatGPT can help us to create reminders and follow-up sequences. So for example, if we need a permit approved to start excavation and it's critical to get done, we could set a schedule that we could follow and continually remind ourselves to go and check. Now, ChatGPT, again, unless we integrate it with tools like Zapier, can't be used to automate this sort of communication yet, but we could easily get it to turn these set of reminders into calendar reminders that we put in our calendar and basically create a schedule to follow up and remind ourselves. As a really simple example, we've asked ChatGPT, can you please create us a reminder sequence for a permit we need approved, and we want to send a reminder every 3 days. And it's just simply drafted us 3 emails we can send as a follow-up to remind the person who needs to approve the permit that we would like the permit approved by a certain date. And it's just a simple, easy way to create reminders. Okay, so I spoke about reminders and follow-up, and I agree, it's not super useful having this all in ChatGPT. We'd still have to go and send the emails, or we still have to put a reminder in our calendar to do the follow-up. You can, however, integrate ChatGPT with tools like Zapier, so it's completely automated for you. Now, that's a bit more advanced than beyond the scope of this course, but the functionality definitely exists. You just have to integrate it with other tools. So for example, that same example of the excavation permits, you could set an automatic follow-up. So if that person hasn't responded to the email chain, every 3 days, send them a follow-up reminder. And then it's completely done for you. Why does communication fail in projects, and what are some ways that ChatGPT can be used to help address this? The first one is complexity. People don't understand the complexity of a project, people miss certain technical things, and overall, people don't fully understand the project scope. We've already seen time and time again how ChatGPT can be used to help us simplify and explain core concepts. So for example, if you have a contract manager on your project who might not understand the technical side of things, well, they can use ChatGPT to help understand these concepts that overall make the projects less complicated. The second way ChatGPT can help is it helps us work out the right people to deal with and the right people to engage with, so the message is communicated to the right people. We'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about ChatGPT for stakeholder management. The next thing is where I see problems in communication is the wrong channels used. So in some instances, we might be sending someone an email, but they might not check email. They might be more responsive on the phone. And because ChatGPT helps us to take information and put it into different communication channels, helps address this problem. The final one, my biggest pain when I was a junior engineer on site, is just simply following things up. A lot of the time people miss communication, they forget to respond, and critical project items get missed. So as we've seen, ChatGPT can be used to help us, and potentially, if we want to integrate it with more advanced tools, be used to create automated follow-up sequences. Okay, in this section, I'm going to be talking about project risk management and how we can use ChatGPT to do that. Risk management is dealing with the uncertain events or conditions that matter to the project. So if something's uncertain, meaning we don't know the outcome, and it matters, which means it has an impact on the project objectives, then we can classify it as a risk. And risk management is the process we follow to deal with this uncertainty. Why do risks matter on projects? Well, a project, by its definition, is a temporary endeavor with a unique deliverable. A project isn't business as usual. We're setting out to do something we've never done before. So we think about what that entails. That means basically a situation where we don't know exactly what's going to happen. We're almost certainly going to encounter unknown and unknowable circumstances. So risk management is the domain of project management where we try to address these uncertain events or conditions that can potentially impact the outcomes we're aiming for with the project. The risk management process can be broken down into several steps. And in this section, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can play an important role in each of these individual steps. So to begin with, identifying risks. So this is where we work out what uncertainty matters to the project. Then we have to analyze these risks. We have to work out what are the most uncertain events or conditions and which ones are going to have the biggest impact on our outputs. Then we need to plan our responses. So for the critical risks we've identified, what are we going to do about them? Are we going to try and mitigate them? Are we going to try and transfer them to another party? So that's planning our risk responses. And then finally, we then need to control the risk management process. So we need to put in place these responses, follow them up, and make sure that they're being implemented correctly. Then keep our risk register updated as we progress through the project. So let's see how ChatGPT can help us in the identifying risk stage. Well, to begin with, ChatGPT can analyze project data to identify potential sources of risk. So we can ask ChatGPT to review the project documentation and to get it to identify sources of risk. We could also use it to facilitate stakeholder engagement. So we could use ChatGPT to create a questionnaire that we send out to stakeholders to coach them through the process of identifying risks. And then we could also just use it in a brainstorming function to help generate a superset of all the project risks. As an example, I've simply asked ChatGPT to create a superset of all the possible risks to our project and group them under separate headings. And it's gone ahead and done that. It's grouped them under technical risk, financial risk, social and political risk, and it's done a pretty good job of generating a list of all the uncertainty that matters to the project. After we've first identified our risks, the next step in the risk management process is to analyze the risks. So we can also use ChatGPT to help us with this. We can ask ChatGPT to make judgments about the likelihood and impact of the project risk. So this is where ChatGPT is directly doing this. And then we could also ask it to visualize the scored risk responses. So turn this information into a chart. As an example, we've asked ChatGPT from the list of risks, identify which risks have the highest likelihood and magnitude. And ChatGPT has gone ahead and each of the individual risks has categorized them into low, medium, or high in terms of their likelihood, and then the consequences when they eventuate. and then it's plotted them on a chart. Now the chart doesn't look great and ChatGPT's overlapped all the data labels. That's why generally when plotting things, it's easy to do it in Excel. I would just ask ChatGPT to put the data in a table that you could just copy directly into Excel. But in this situation, it has been able to plot the chart. It just has to fix up the data labels. Now that we've identified our risks, so we've worked out all the sources of uncertainty that matter to the project, and then we've analyzed them. So we've put these in categories of low, medium, or high likelihood and consequences. Now we need to plan our responses to them. And to do this, we're going to use the brainstorming function in ChatGPT again to help us generate a superset of all the possible things we could do about the risk. So this is where we plan our responses. Then we could also ask ChatGPT to help us allocate these response plans to different project team members to make sure they actually get put in place. So here, primarily, we're going to be using the brainstorming function of ChatGPT to help us create a list of all the possible response plans we could use. Then, as an example, I've asked ChatGPT, based on the risks you've identified, can you please plan responses for all these risks? And as we've given an example that, say, for weather delays, we could transfer that risk to a construction contractor. And against each of the risks that ChatGPT's identified, they've identified a response plan. So, for example, skill shortages or safety incidents, they've given us a response that we can use to then put in place, follow up, and ensure that that risk is in fact controlled. Now, once we've identified our risk response plan, so what we're going to do to manage the risk, the next step is simply just to monitor. So we need to make sure that these risk response plans are in fact put in place. So we need to be following that up regularly and checking it's being done. So in that situation, we could use that functionality of ChatGPT. And although we're not going to cover it in this course, you could look at integrating it with a tool like Zapier, where you could actually automate the follow-up sequence to make sure these response plans have been put in place. Then we can also just maintain our risk register with ChatGPT. So as the project progresses, new things happen, we can go through that same sequence of identify, analyze, and planning responses with the support of ChatGPT. As an example, we've simply asked ChatGPT, based on all the risks it's identified, to put it in a table and against the planned risk responses, put a person who's responsible. Once you make someone responsible, an individual is then accountable for making sure the risk response plan is going to be put into action. And ultimately, they're going to be much, much, much more likely to see that it's actually done. What are the biggest challenges to effective project risk management, and how can ChatGPT help with them? Well, the number one is just project resilience. So if you have a disciplined project management approach, which doesn't just mean project risk management, but if you're implementing all the project management functions properly and seeing that our budget's being controlled properly, that we're going through a proper change control process, that we're using our schedule and keeping it relevant, then our project's just going to be much more capable of dealing with uncertain events or conditions. As we've seen, ChatGPT acts as a great tool to implement all of the project management functions. So if we're using ChatGPT in other project domains, it's automatically going to help us with our project resilience because we're going to be doing all the other project management functions more effectively. The next is ChatGPT just helps us to deal with change because it's so easy to recalculate the impacts of different things changing. We're just more adaptable to dealing with change if we have a tool like ChatGPT. So it's going to help us dealing with change, updating our risk register when circumstances change. The next is just keeping our project documentation relevant. So keeping our risk register up to date by just simply making it so easy to go through this identify, analyze, and planning responses. We're just going to keep our project risk register much more relevant and much more of a functional tool that's going to be used to control risks, which is what it's there for. And finally, the most common issue you see with project risk management is people simply going through the planning process. So they identify the risks, they analyze the risks, then they plan the responses, but then nobody does anything about it. The responses never actually get put into action. That's why having a proper follow-up sequence, keeping people accountable, making the risk management process really, really easy and doing it at regular intervals, we're just going to see better results because there's going to be a much more likelihood that the risk response plans are actually implemented. In this section, we're going to look at project procurement management and how ChatGPT can help us do a better job of finding and acquiring the suppliers and subcontractors we need to deliver the project. If we define procurement, it's the process of finding and acquiring the external goods and services we need to complete the project. So I spoke about this a little bit when we were talking about resource management, and we spoke about there were internal resources and external resources. We spoke about internal resources like project team members we'd go through a HR process to hire. External resources like suppliers, subcontractors, materials, things we need to buy to complete the project, we go through a procurement process. And why does procurement matter so much for project management? Well, the short answer is there are very, very, very few projects, unless they're absolutely tiny, that can be delivered without engaging external suppliers and vendors. You think about any construction project, you've got subcontractors, you've got suppliers, you've got design consultants, you've got all these other parties working externally to your organization that are contributing to getting the project work done. And you need a proper procurement process to find and select these vendors and to make sure that you're choosing the right vendor to deliver the portion of the project scope that you need them to. The procurement process is really, really simple, and we're going to look at how ChatGPT can help in each of these steps. So step one is just to work out what we need to procure. And this is similar to what we spoke about in resource management, where you need to find what resources you need to complete the project. So that's working out what we need to procure. Step two is preparing tender documentation. So this is preparing things like RFQ documents or requests for quotation documents, pricing schedules, documents we're going to send to vendors to explain what we want to buy and so that they can then submit us a quote. Then step three is actually managing the procurement. So it's sending this documentation to vendors, getting quotes back, and selecting the vendor that best suits the needs of our project. So in the planning procurement phase, ChatGPT can help us with a couple of things. The first is working out what we need to procure. We can use it to take the work breakdown structure, turn it into a set of resources we need, and then turn these resources into a shopping list. What are the things we need to buy to complete the project? Second thing we can use it for is actually preparing the tender documentation. So if we need to buy a certain type of software, we could get ChatGPT to write us a specification that describes what we want. We could feed it a basic outline, describe what we're looking for, but get ChatGPT to write the formal tender documentation. As an example, we've prompted ChatGPT from the work breakdown structure of the road construction project, create a list of everything we need to procure to complete the project. And we've asked it to do it from the perspective of the general contractor. And it's gone ahead and created a massive list. It's got materials, it's got equipment, it's got different services we need. It's got things like cranes, safety equipment, temporary utilities and facilities. Overall, it's created a pretty comprehensive list. And the next thing we've asked it to do is to write an RFP document for surveying services. So we're going to need a surveyor on our project. We need to describe what we want them to provide, how we want them to produce the quote. And so ChatGPT, based off that single prompt, has gone and written us a proper RFP document that we could then send to a surveying company. We could send to several surveying companies to get quotes. And in it, it's describing everything. It's saying what sort of work they're going to be doing, what we're requesting of them, how we're going to evaluate their tender, so what criteria we're looking for. And overall, it's given us a comprehensive scope of works document. The next step is how we actually conduct procurement. So once we've worked out what we need to procure, we've written all our tender documentation, so we've got our RFP docs ready to send to suppliers. We need to get quotes from suppliers now, and ChatGPT can help us with evaluating proposals. So we could upload the quotes we've received from suppliers and get ChatGPT to review them. We can use it to review tender documentation that has been supplied to make sure the tender has provided all the documentation we need, that it complies with our requirements. We can get it to do a gap analysis. So for example, if a couple of contractors have given back quotes and they've written their exclusions from our contract documents, we could get them to compare these different submittals and to get them to review the documentation that's been provided. And once we're actually going through the process of finalizing and signing a contract to sign up a vendor, we can actually use ChatGPT for some contract management functions. So we could get it to draft a contract, we could get it to review a contract, and we can get it to help with those sorts of commercial things as well. As a super simple example, we've just asked ChatGPT to write a list of criteria for assessing this package. So ChatGPT is going to create a list of our criteria that we're going to use to determine how we're going to assess this surveying package. And it's got things like quality of service, timeliness, regulatory compliance, and it's basically given us a checklist we can go through when we're looking at all the quotes that come back to us. Once we've actually awarded and signed a contract, and then we're at the suppliers performing the work under the contract, there's a couple of things ChatGPT can help with when we're actually managing the procurement. So we can use ChatGPT to help us track the performance of the vendor. So you get the vendor to provide regular reports of how they're going. You get ChatGPT to do something like an earned value management calculation and produce us a dashboard of their performance. We could use ChatGPT to manage communication. So as anyone knows who's managed subcontractors or suppliers, you're going to have regular meetings with them. Things are going to be discussed in the meetings that potentially have commercial implications. You could simply use a tool like Loom, record your meeting with the supplier, document it, get it to export it as a transcript, upload the transcript as ChatGPT and get it to write you a meeting summary. And it's also going to help us deal with changes. So when there's a variation for a subcontractor or a supplier, we could ask ChatGPT to review the variation and say whether it's founded or unfounded based on its interpretation of documentation. You can really use it in a lot of different ways when you're talking about contract management. In summary, what are the biggest challenges to project procurement management and how can ChatGPT help with these? Well, the first one is definition, defining exactly what we need to procure for the project, what we want to buy. ChatGPT can help us write accurate scope of works. It can help review the project documentation to make sure that we're defining what we want to buy properly in line with the project requirements. And it can help us basically to produce really, really good tender packages so our vendors understand exactly what we're looking for. The next thing, communication. Communication is always a problem both in procurement and contract formation and eventually during contract administration. So ChatGPT, as we spoke about, we can use it to track communication between different vendors so that anything that's discussed is recorded and documented, and we can use it to update project documents based on that. We can use ChatGPT with vendor assessments, so choosing the correct subcontractors. So often you see on projects that people don't choose the best subcontractor, they choose the cheapest subcontractor. And that ultimately creates nightmares for projects. So ChatGPT can help us put together a comprehensive evaluation criteria so we make sure we're considering everything when we're choosing a subcontractor. And finally, so ChatGPT can help us to actually manage our vendor performance. So this is when we're managing the procurement and after the contract's signed, ChatGPT can help us to track and document certain things, ask them for regular updates, and basically just to stay on top of it. So we make sure we're getting what we paid for. Okay, last but not least, project stakeholder management and how can we use ChatGPT to make us better and more effective at managing the people we influence by the project. Let's get started with the definition. Stakeholder management, what is it? Stakeholder management is the management of individuals who are impacted by or have influence over the project. So there's two sides to that. Anybody who's impacted by the project is a stakeholder, but also anyone who has influence on the project is also a stakeholder. Why does stakeholder management matter? Well, if you're wondering why I have a vacuum on the screen, it's because projects do not occur in a vacuum. Projects impact everybody around them. Projects have influence on local community members, internal members of the business, external vendors, subcontractors, suppliers. There's people paying for the project to be done. Overall, projects influence a ton of different people, and a ton of different people also have influence on the project. So something someone external to the project does can have a tangible, real impact on the project's outcomes. And that's why we need to be considering who has influence over the project and who is impacted by it to effectively manage a project. Project stakeholder management occurs in 4 stages, and we're going to look at how ChatGPT plays a role in each of these stages. First is identifying our stakeholders, working out who they are. Second is analyzing our stakeholders, working out what their influence and interest in the project is. The next is engaging with our stakeholders and developing engagement strategies based on this analysis. And the final thing is during project execution, managing the relationship with these stakeholders, getting feedback and improving these processes. So the first step, stakeholder identification, and you can probably guess exactly what I'm going to show you in this section, but we use ChatGPT to help us identify our stakeholders. Based on the project documentation, we can get ChatGPT to generate a superset of all the possible stakeholders impacted by the project based on its understanding of the project scope, documentation, and context. So very simply, I've just asked ChatGPT to identify a list of potential stakeholders. It's broken it down to internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. It's talking about things like contractors and suppliers and government agencies, regulatory advisory bodies, and overall it's considering everybody that's impacted by or who has influence over the project. Once we've first identified our list of stakeholders, the next step is to analyze them. So we can use ChatGPT to score stakeholders based on their influence and interest over the project. So based on its understanding of the context, it'll make assumptions around which are the most critical stakeholders. We can use it to actually create feedback surveys and engage with stakeholders. We can use it to rank stakeholders, and then we could also use it for risk identification. What are the key stakeholder risks? What could go wrong with certain stakeholders? There's a tangible impact on project performance. So ChatGPT can help us to manage this side of stakeholder uncertainty. Again, another super simple example. I've just asked ChatGPT for each stakeholder, score their interest and influence over the project, and it's gone ahead and done this. It's categorized different stakeholders with a high interest and a high influence. So those are the stakeholders we're going to be focusing on. Then other stakeholders, they have lower interest, lower influence, and those are the stakeholders we don't need to put as much time and attention into. And overall, it's just gone for each of the stakeholders and given us the information we need to know. And again, we'd always have to check this to make sure it makes sense, because the context we have, our understanding of the project, is always going to be better than ChatGPT's. Once we've identified our stakeholders, analyzed them, worked out who are the important ones, the next step is to manage them. So we can use ChatGPT to brainstorm engagement strategies, so to help us develop different strategies for dealing with stakeholders. We can then use it to choose an optimal engagement strategy. We can then update our communications management plan with these strategies all through ChatGPT. And also we could use it to provide training for the project team on how to manage stakeholders and basically anything we can think of. So as an example, for the highest impact, highest influence stakeholders, I've asked ChatGPT to provide us a detailed engagement strategy, and it's gone ahead and done that. It's identified the greatest stakeholder as government agencies, and it's written us a detailed strategy of how we could manage this stakeholder. And then once we've developed our engagement strategies, we can then use ChatGPT to help monitor these stakeholders during project execution. So we can produce a newsletter that we regularly distribute, updating key stakeholders on the performance of the project, or we could produce a report like we've already spoken about. And basically we can come up with some different ways where we can use the content creation function of ChatGPT to keep our stakeholders informed and happy. So to summarize, what are the biggest challenges with project stakeholder management and what can ChatGPT do to help us? Well, the first one is disruption. When stakeholders get offside, they won't be as supportive of the project and they can even potentially disrupt it. ChatGPT can help us plan our stakeholder management properly and make sure we're thinking about these possible situations that could occur when developing engagement strategies before they do. Second one is decision making. Stakeholders who play key decision-making roles might delay decisions which impact the project. Think, for example, a business manager who needs to approve a certain budget increase. If he's not kept along for the journey, then he's not going to be aware of the decision, the context. It's going to be harder to get decisions made. Because ChatGPT allows us to easily communicate and keep our stakeholders updated with reports, with newsletters, with things like that, ChatGPT is going to help prevent these sorts of circumstances arriving. The next one I see a lot on projects is particularly when you have an external stakeholder like a utility or someone who's impacted by the project, but they're not necessarily the recipient of the output of the project. So these sorts of companies might have strict rules and regulations you need to follow, and they don't really care whether your project's a success or not. Well, ChatGPT can help you systematize your functions and to make sure you understand what their rules and regulations are and that you're following them. So that I find that's a big one, particularly on construction projects when you have external utility providers that have rules about how you're meant to operate. ChatGPT can help you to understand and simplify these rules and basically to make sure that you're staying on top of them. And then finally, the last one I'll say is often stakeholders are just missed. There isn't, the same one when I was talking about risk management, is because it's not necessarily a critical discipline like project execution or project delivery teams. They don't give it the attention it deserves. That's why using a tool like ChatGPT that makes the stakeholder management process really, really easy is just a simple way of making sure it gets given the time and attention that it deserves. Okay, let's finish up with a quick summary of what we've covered and we'll go through a recap. We're not going to cover any of these concepts in detail. The purpose of this section is to purely remind you of all the different things we've covered. So if you ever need to go back and refresh something, one of the concepts we spoke about doesn't really make sense, then it's easy for you to go back and find the correct lecture. But we're not going to be covering all this stuff in detail. We're just going to fly through it. So what did we cover? We covered the basics of ChatGPT, so how it works, how to set it up, what it actually is. We spoke about the general uses of ChatGPT, so not necessarily for project management, just general use cases of ChatGPT, what it's good for, things like data analysis, things like content creation, things like summarizing and rewriting. Then finally, we spent some time going through the specific applications of ChatGPT to project management. We spoke about all the different functions of project management and gave you some potential use cases of ChatGPT. When we covered the basics of ChatGPT, we spoke about understanding ChatGPT, so what it actually is, what you can use it for, how it's set up. We spoke about the capabilities and limitations. We spoke about what it's good for, but also what it's not so good for. We spoke about how to set up ChatGPT, and then also we looked at our case study. So we went through a case study for the Greenway expansion project, and we uploaded all this project information to ChatGPT to give it context about our project. Then in section 2, we looked at the uses of ChatGPT. So we spoke about how to write a good prompt, basically the concept of prompt engineering and what goes into an effective prompt. So what you can tell ChatGPT so you get the answer you want. We looked at how ChatGPT can be used for writing and content creation. We spoke about how ChatGPT is fantastic at summarizing information. So you've got a whole lot of documents, but you only want to know a few things, then ChatGPT is fantastic at that. We spoke about how ChatGPT could be used in communication. We looked at how it could be used to write everything from an email to create a presentation. We looked at how ChatGPT can be used for data analysis. So if you have a set of data, how it can help with that. We spoke about how ChatGPT can be used for brainstorming. And then we spoke about ChatGPT can be used to simplify and explain complicated concepts so you can use it for education. So I like to talk about one use where I constantly use it every day. It's that. It's for education. It's helping me understand new concepts. I think it's incredibly good at that. We then went through all the functions of a predictive project. So we spoke about project integration, project scope management, project cost management, project schedule management, project quality management, all of these different domains of project management. And we looked at specific uses of ChatGPT. So how you can take ChatGPT and use it to make this domain of the project easier. For example, when we spoke about cost management, we spoke about how ChatGPT could actually be used to estimate costs, how we could use it to come up with productivities, how we could use it to determine what resources are required for a task. Basically, the purpose of section 3 was to go through all of these different project management functions and show you specific uses. Now, these are the ways I use it and I think are the most generally applicable uses. I'm sure that if you start using it, you start experimenting it with, you're going to come up with better ways to use it that are more suited to you. So what's next? My recommendation is to start using ChatGPT as quickly as possible. You'll get a feel for how it works. You'll get a feel for what you can do with it, and you'll see how it can help you in your job as a project manager. I'm fascinated by what's happening with AI, what's happening with ChatGPT. So if you think of any awesome uses I've missed, make sure you send me an email and make sure you get in contact. So I'm fascinated to hear how you're potentially using ChatGPT in ways that I haven't thought of or I'm yet to learn how to do. If you think about it too much, AI can be a scary concept. It's quite a scary idea that all our jobs are going to eventually be replaced by these super intelligent generative AIs. However, all I can say is that if you look at history, humans have been particularly bad at predicting the future. If you look back at the 1940s, people thought by now we'd all have flying cars. But ultimately, these sorts of predictions have been made time and time again during history. So all those people saying every single job is going to be replaced by AI, maybe they're 100% right. However, all we can do is safeguard ourselves for the future. And the way we're going to be able to do that is by learning to master these new tools, being able to integrate them into our jobs and finding how we can maximize the value we add. So in this section, I'm not actually going to talk about any future trends for AI. I'm just going to say, don't worry too much about all the noise where people are talking about how the entire future is going to be controlled by AI. Maybe they're 100% right. Who knows? I certainly don't know. All I can say is my recommendation to you, and personally what I'm trying to do with my career is I'm trying to focus on how to best use these tools to improve my job performance. Thank you so much for taking the course. As I mentioned in the introduction, it's an amazing feeling to have so many people interested in these courses and taking them, and I congratulate you for getting to the end. Now, what's next? My recommendation, as I've said time and time again during the course, is to start using ChatGPT. Try and use it every single day, work out what tasks you can automate, and you'll be surprised at what applications you can find. I use it every single day, and every single day I find new ways to make my life easier. So I recommend taking it and using it and trying to automate every single thing you do. That should be your goal. If you're interested in taking further courses, make sure you check out my link on Udemy to explore some of the other courses we offer. And if you have any suggestions or you find anything about how you can use ChatGPT to make your life easier as a project manager, I would love to hear about them and love to see the creative ways people are finding to use it. Again, congratulations on finishing the course. It's fantastic work, and hopefully you've got something out of it, and hopefully it's created real value and you've improved your performance as a project manager by mastering this fascinating new skill.